Chapter 1861. Run away? Why should I run away? Yi Shiwen's clear voice sounded a little strange. Zhan Ming, do you really think that I can't deal with you? You're too naive. Yi Shiwen's eyes suddenly burst with the light of wisdom. Behind him, an incomparably huge turntable slowly rose, rumbling as it rotated. With every passing second, it seemed to increase his might. Turned out to be another 12 zodiac wheel. This zodiac wheel rotated with a rumbling sound, as if it was controlling everything around it, completely crushing everything into pieces. How is this possible? Zhan Ming looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief. It was not only because Yi Shiwen had condensed the 12 zodiac grand wheel, but because Yi Shiwen's 12 zodiac grand wheel was much more complete and powerful than his. In fact, Yi Shiwen's 12 zodiac grand wheel was much more powerful than the 12 zodiac warriors at the peak of the profound life realm. The 12 zodiac grand wheel required the 12 zodiac warriors to work together, but Yi Shiwen was able to activate it by himself. It was enough to show how powerful Yi Shiwen's skills had become. Chu Yun, we must hurry up and join forces. This kid's cultivation is abnormally frightening. If we can't kill him, he will definitely become a great threat to us. Zhan Ming hurriedly roared. The two huge wheels collided in the void and devoured each other. Zhan Ming's 12 zodiac grand wheel seemed so vulnerable in front of Yi Shiwen. It was not a match for him at all. Under the attacks of Yi Shiwen's 12 zodiac grand wheel, all of Zhan Ming's defenses collapsed and he was forced to retreat. Yi Shiwen's constant tolerance and retreat made Zhan Ming think that he was unable to deal with the 12 zodiac grand wheel. It was to allow Zhan Ming to continue using the 12 zodiac grand wheel so that he could have the opportunity to comprehend and deduce more details. After such a long time, he had finally deduced the mysteries of the 12 zodiac grand wheel. However, he was still far from mastering it, let alone using the legendary 12 zodiac grand wheel, the 12 king-ranked powerhouses. However, it was already much better than Zhan Ming's 12 zodiac big wheel. Moreover, his skill was also a notch higher than Zhan Ming's, so when they fought, he almost completely crushed Zhan Ming. At this time, Zhan Ming was already a little frightened. On one hand, he kept urging the 12 zodiac wheel, and on the other hand, a huge axe appeared in his hand. He directly chopped down. One attack and one defense, complementing each other. Many people were mesmerized by this scene. In fact, Zhan Ming's strength wasn't bad. His comprehension of martial arts wasn't bad either. However, the reason why he had become like this was because Yi Shiwen was too tyrannical. Die, heaven-splitting axe! He let out a deafening roar, and a gigantic axe condensed behind him. It was a condensation of all his comprehension of the axe Tao. It was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people, and it even had the power to split the heavens and earth. Amidst the whistling sound, a huge axe chopped down towards Yi Shiwen as if it was about to split the sky and the earth. The surrounding cosmos of day and night had been completely reversed, completely enveloping Yi Shiwen. It wanted to break the defense of the yin-yang life and death diagram in an instant. Not bad. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but admit that Zhan Ming was indeed an outstanding figure. If Zhan Ming hadn't met Yi Shiwen, it would have been much more difficult for Yi Shiwen to deal with him after Zhan Ming had completely consolidated his profound life realm peak and stepped into the small realm. However, all of this was useless. Every pore of Yi Shiwen's was emitting golden divinities. They directly unfolded, and then turned into a golden god. This god directly unfolded, and then a huge hand grabbed towards the huge axe. Boom! An incomparably loud collision sound suddenly exploded, and a huge crack appeared in the sky. Everything within a radius of 1,000 miles had completely collapsed. Both sides had done their best. Therefore, the power of this exchange was even more terrifying. The huge hand of the golden god that Yi Shiwen had turned into was directly smashed into pieces. The power of Zhan Ming's all-out attack was still very tyrannical. No one dared to ignore the sneak attack of such an expert. After directly smashing Yi Shiwen's golden hand into pieces, Zhan Ming attacked again, almost in the next moment. The axe radiance in the sky bloomed with amazing light. It didn't matter whether it was day or night. It possessed endless power and covered everything. Do you really think that I can't do anything to you? Yi Shiwen sneered, and directly took a step forward. The void instantly collapsed, an endless sword intent was directly forced out of his body. Then, it turned into an incomparably huge iron sword, and directly blasted towards the golden axe on the spot. Boom! A large area of the void of the universe collapsed, and endless laws were directly broken. It was a scene of doomsday everywhere. Both sides collided in the void, and then the huge axe suddenly exploded on the spot. What a powerful sword intent! What is this? Zhan Ming was shocked, and immediately surrounded himself with boiling axe radiance, to prevent himself from being hurt by the sword intent. He was also extremely shocked. In this sword intent, there was a king's way, a brilliant sword power that made everyone want to surrender. When it swept out, even he was shocked. If it wasn't for the special cultivation method that he practiced, ordinary people might not even be able to withstand this sword pressure. After smashing the axe radiance, Yi Shiwen instantly gained the upper hand. His big hand directly grabbed towards the void, and directly grabbed a golden long sword. The sharp edge of the sword directly broke, and its target was directly Zhan Ming. Zhan Ming was directly forced by the sword intent. He quickly took out the axe in his hand, and continuously defended in the void. He kept retreating, and was directly forced by Yi Shiwen to directly retreat hundreds of miles. At this moment, just when the battle between the three of them was in full swing, suddenly, there was a sudden violent fluctuation in the depths of the treasure house. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and then instantly reacted. Someone was fighting inside. At this time, besides Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian, who else would still be fighting inside? There was only one possibility for these two top-notch experts to break out into a conflict and start fighting without caring about anything else. They must have discovered some sort of extraordinary treasure, and that was the only possibility. Thinking of this, everyone's heart suddenly tightened. Even Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian were tempted by those treasures, and even did not hesitate to fight for them. One could imagine how important those treasures were, and it was very likely that they were the national treasures of the country of darkness. Everyone's heart tightened at once. This was simply asking for their lives. After a while, Qin Lai's aura of extreme sublimation spread out, and the Sky Emperor Godly Fist was continuously blasted out as if it was free. Yi Shiwen's heart trembled. He did not expect Jun Dingtian to be a bit stronger than he had imagined. He was very clear about Qin Lai's strength, and under the circumstances of the Sky Emperor Godly Fist, he could even contend with the experts at the peak of the profound life realm. However, Jun Dingtian had directly forced Qin Lai to use the Sky Emperor Godly Fist, which was enough to prove how powerful his strength was. More importantly, Qin Lai did not seem to dare to stop for a moment, and actually continuously blasted out the Sky Emperor Godly Fist. According to Yemo, the Sky Emperor Godly Fist was the peerless lost technique of Heavenly Sovereign Fuxi. In the past, no one knew how many top experts had been killed, and even some of them were at the Emperor level. This was a peerless figure who had once led the human clan to rise from the war between the three clans. Even the mysterious space in his body had almost drained him to calculate such a martial art. On the other hand, such a martial art must consume a lot of energy. If he had time, he might be able to persist for a little longer, but if he continuously blasted out the Sky Emperor Godly Fist, it would not take long for him to be completely exhausted. By that time, wouldn't he be at Jun Dingtian's mercy? Most importantly, it was very likely that the treasure would fall into Jun Dingtian's hands. Jun Dingtian was an opponent that even he was afraid of. If he allowed Jun Dingtian to develop like this, He had a hunch that one day, Jun Dingtian would become his greatest enemy. Thinking of this, he suddenly became nervous, but the two people in front of him were tightly entangled with him, and there was no way at all. Compared to Yi Shiwen, both Zhan Ming and Chu Yun were very nervous. If Qin Lai or Jun Dingtian were to get it, wouldn't they fall behind? However, they also knew that at this time, the more anxious they were, the more they couldn't be anxious. Chu Yun's expression gradually calmed down, but the movements of his body became more and more dangerous. There was a faint state of integration with the world, and the aura of his whole body was restrained. It erupted little by little, and each eruption was much more tyrannical than the previous one. Slowly, his aura grew all of a sudden, like a dark cloud that suddenly covered the entire sky. Step by step, he moved towards Yi Shiwen to suppress him. At this time, Yi Shiwen's main focus was on Zhan Ming. He wanted to kill Zhan Ming first, and then deal with Chu Yun. Therefore, in the face of Chu Yun's attack, Yi Shiwen constantly retreated, and did not fight recklessly. He wanted to eliminate Zhan Ming first, and then consider other things. However, Chu Yun also knew what Yi Shiwen was thinking, and did not give him a chance, and pressed forward step by step. Everyone held their breath. No matter how anxious they were very clear that whether they could go in, and when they could go in, depended on these three people. Everyone only saw Chu Yun directly spread out his big hand, and slap towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1862. Chu Yun's palm seemed to have exhausted all his strength. His face instantly turned pale, as if all the blood in his body had been sucked out in an instant, making his face look extremely pale. Yi Shiwen could see at a glance that Chu Yun's palm strike had burned a lot of his life force. His black hair had almost turned white in an instant. In order to compete for the treasure, he had gone all out. Only by defeating Yi Shiwen as soon as possible would he be able to get a share of the loot. At this point, he no longer had the thought of killing Yi Shiwen. Perhaps there would be hope if the battle continued for a long time, but he didn't have that much time. He also didn't want to work so hard just to make a wedding dress for someone else. In order to defeat Chu Yun and not let him continue to pester him, that was the best way. Even Yi Shiwen felt the danger of this palm, but his state of mind did not change. Although he was anxious, he was in the calmest state, allowing him to make the most accurate judgment. At this time, he was not in a hurry at all. Golden divinities constantly emerged from his body, wrapping him in it, making him look like a god living in this world. A majestic power was boiling from his body. Those golden divinities directly turned into a huge golden god. This god, at that moment, instantly attacked Chu Yun's palm. In the void, the palm transformed into a golden light that filled the sky. Countless huge hands were formed and, like an ocean, they flooded towards Chu Yun. Boom! 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 A loud rumbling sound resounded, and Yi Shiwen's countless big hands were smashed into pieces by Chu Yun's palm attack. However, more and more giant hands appeared. It was as if there was no end to the number of giant hands. Slowly, Chu Yun's big hands were completely submerged. Using quantity to win, Yi Shiwen's body's qi was far more than the experts of the same realm by many times. This qi swept out like the yellow river, unfathomable, almost immeasurable. On the face of the god, there was a slight sneer, as if laughing at Chu Yun's overconfidence. And in front of this god, Yi Shiwen directly attacked. He suddenly stepped on his feet, and his figure directly flew out like a golden lightning, directly smashing towards Chu Yun's head. Chu Yun's head was the hardest part of his entire body. If his body was as hard as metal, then his head was as hard as a diamond. It was incomparably hard, far surpassing normal metal. At this time, he also saw Yi Shiwen's intention. Yi Shiwen wanted to take advantage of the situation, and while he had the upper hand, Yi Shiwen chased after him and severely injured him in one fell swoop. No, I can't let him succeed. He gritted his teeth and glanced at Yi Shiwen's golden hand that had been completely submerged in the sky. This was condensed by burning his life force, but it still couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen. At this time, he hurriedly retreated. He couldn't let Yi Shiwen succeed. Otherwise, his ending would be extremely miserable. He would be seriously injured by Yi Shiwen. Through the previous exchange, he was very clear that Yi Shiwen's physical strength was tyrannical. Even he couldn't compare to Yi Shiwen. And just at the moment when his body retreated, Yi Shiwen had already pounced on him, chasing him closely. Damn it! He finally saw that Yi Shiwen really wanted to kill him. At this time, he finally understood how Zhan Ming felt just now. The feeling of being completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen was too aggrieved. Even if he had extraordinary confidence in his own body, he did not dare to resist Yi Shiwen's bombardment like this. The golden god behind Yi Shiwen directly shot out thousands of rays of golden light and shot out a monstrous big hand. It didn't use any exquisite palm technique. It was just a simple grab. The essence of one's strength can overcome 10 was displayed incisively and vividly in this move. At this time, when he was about to call for Zhan Ming to attack, he saw that Zhan Ming, who had finally escaped from Yi Shiwen's clutches, had no intention of cooperating with him to block Yi Shiwen. Zhan Ming actually took advantage of the time when he was blocking Yi Shiwen to escape, and jumped into the depths of the treasure house. Damn it, Zhan Ming, I must kill you! Chu Yun constantly roared angrily. At this time, one could imagine the anger in his heart being betrayed by his ally. In an instant, Zhan Ming had already surpassed the degree of hatred in his heart for Yi Shiwen. He and Yi Shiwen had a normal collision and confrontation, but it was completely different when he was completely betrayed by Zhan Ming. Although they were only a temporary alliance, and did not have much trust in each other, being betrayed like this still made him suddenly furious. If someone had to betray someone, it could only be him who betrayed someone else. Moreover, he did not betray Zhan Ming just now, but he was betrayed at this time. This was intolerable. Yi Shiwen, it is meaningless for you to stop me at this time. If the treasures are divided by the three of them, what is the point of you stopping me? Chu Yun kept retreating as he roared, if you really want to fight, then we can only fight to the death and both of us will suffer. You want to fight to the death with me? You are thinking too much. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly, but in retrospect, indeed, what Chu Yun said made sense. Now that Zhan Ming had also taken advantage of the situation to escape, there was no point in stopping him. Moreover, now that Zhan Ming and Chu Yun had completely fallen out, letting Chu Yun go would instead give Zhan Ming a headache for a while. These two top experts, even if they were in dire straits, it would not be easy for him to kill them. It was really not worth it to fight to the death with them now. I will let you go for today, Yi Shiwen said, and directly grabbed Princess Tianqing, and then instantly turned into a ball of lightning, rushing into the depths of the treasure house. Chu Yun, who had escaped a disaster, was obviously relieved at this time, and then his eyes looked at the two figures in the depths of the treasure house, bursting with hatred. Damn it, Yi Shiwen, Zhan Ming, sooner or later, I will make you die without a burial place. He kept roaring in a low voice. Since his debut until now, when had he suffered such a big loss? 2 against 1, but he could not defeat Yi Shiwen, and more importantly, he was betrayed by Zhan Ming. If there was a chance in the future, he must thoroughly kill these two to avenge today's shame. White smoke constantly rose from the top of his head, and not long after, the white hair on his head turned black again, looking no different from before. However, he knew that this time, he had suffered a big loss, and even burned his life to fight. It was really a double loss. Thinking of this, he did not dare to stay for a moment, and hurriedly rushed into the depths of the treasure house. At this moment, when everyone saw the situation, how could they still have the slightest hesitation? They all leaped into the depths of the treasure vault. For a moment, the scene was incomparably chaotic. Endless treasure light and divine light collided continuously in the sky. It was simply like a flower of fireworks. At this time, Yi Shiwen had directly entered the depths of the treasure house, and in an instant Zhan Ming, who was originally in front of him, directly turned a corner and rushed into another side hall. Yi Shiwen did not chase after him, but directly flew towards the place where Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian were fighting, because there must be great treasures there. At this time, how would Zhan Ming dare to go with Yi Shiwen? If it was possible, Yi Shiwen would not mind killing him on the way. Both of them could barely contend against Yi Shiwen, let alone one person. This hall was incomparably wide, and it was called the Dark Hall. Upon entering the Dark Palace, Yi Shiwen immediately sensed that the endless darkness aura had suddenly become denser. It had formed an extremely frightening pressure that spread in all directions. It made it extremely difficult for anyone to approach it. At this time, even Princess Tianqing, who had also entered the profound life realm, could already feel the strong pressure from just the periphery, and even felt a sense of suffocation. Bursts of golden rays of light appeared around Yi Shiwen's body, forming a domain. However, this domain couldn't expand as far as it usually could. In fact, it could only maintain a distance of less than 100 meters. However, it was enough for him to wander around in this domain. Yi Shiwen didn't stop at all and directly rushed inside. He saw that it was an incomparably large hall. Above the hall, there were many dark instruments placed all around, constantly exuding terrifying rays of light and deathly aura. It was unknown how many years these countless instruments had been stored in order to form such a huge coercion. Any one of these instruments could be said to be priceless, and just a few of them added up would be worth the value of a dragon's vein. Moreover, there were thousands of instruments at a glance. This can't be an arsenal, right? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, "Now that you've put it that way, that might really be the case. It's rumored that the Darkness Master is a general under the command of the Master of Undead Spirits. Back then, when the Master of Undead Spirits was waging war across the world, the Darkness Master led an army by himself. It's highly possible that this place is an armory. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many magical weapons here." Princess Tianqing nodded her head and said, "Moreover, it's very obvious that these magic tools have been arranged into a gigantic formation. Their oppressive auras are linked together. That's why they're so powerful. Even profound life stage experts find it difficult to walk. If it was a king-rank expert, I'm afraid that he or she would have exploded into a bloody mist the moment they entered." Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh with emotion. These were all profound weapons used by profound realm expert. Thousands of profound weapons were enough to arm thousands of profound realm expert. Even in the era of the rise of kings, this was still a powerful force that could sweep through all directions. Chapter 1863. What surprised Yi Shiwen even more was that in the center of the hall, there was a huge corpse sitting cross-legged on a huge throne in the center of the hall. He saw that this huge throne was surrounded by countless lamps. These lamps were flickering with dark ghost flames. They had been burning since a long time ago, but after so many years, these endless dark ghost flames still showed no signs of extinguishing. "This is Ghost Heart Flame." At this time, Yi Mo suddenly shouted, "Yi Shiwen, you are going to be rich. Ha ha, this is Ghost Heart Flame." "What is this?" Yi Shiwen asked. "This is a very rare flame, and this kind of flame can't be refined by ordinary means. It is a supreme treasure for practicing ghost cultivation. It is said that this flame has absorbed the heart flames of countless ghosts. This is the wisdom of countless ghosts. So if you ignite a ghost heart flame, it is like there are countless people thinking for you. You can quickly reach a conclusion. Therefore, this ghost heart flame is also used to promote cultivation." Yi Mo said hurriedly, however, "I have only seen a few of these flames in the Demon King's treasure house. Even the Demon King didn't have a place to collect so many ghost heart flames. Moreover, at the level of the Demon King, the ghost heart flame is basically useless to him. It is just an ordinary flame, so there aren't many of them. However, this ghost heart flame has a miraculous effect even for king-level powerhouses or gods. For those below king-level powerhouses, they will advance by leaps and bounds. I can't believe that there are so many ghost heart flames here. Haha, Yi Shiwen, you are going to be rich. Compared to the ghost heart flame that Yemo mentioned, Yi Shiwen was more concerned about who was so extravagant to have so many ghost heart flames. According to Yemo, in the outside world, one ghost heart flame was already very rare. His gaze pierced through the ghost heart fire and landed on the tall figure sitting cross-legged on the throne. Ghost heart flame, there really is ghost heart flame. Princess Tianqing suddenly seemed to have lost her mind. I always thought that this was just a legend. I didn't expect that this dark palace actually exists, and this ghost heart flame really exists. You know the origin of this ghost heart flame? Yi Shiwen saw that she seemed to know, so he quickly asked. Yes, if I'm not wrong, this should be the sleeping chamber of the Lord of Darkness back then. The ancestors of our country of darkness had once entered this place and obtained our country of darkness's guardian artifact here. Princess Tianqing said, How precious is the ghost heart flame? Even if our dark nation is close to the undead soul abyss, and there are endless dead creatures and ghosts, we don't dare to say how many ghost heart flames there are. I've only seen a ghost heart flame in the ancestral temple of the Dark Palace. It is said that our ancestors obtained it from the Dark Palace. It has been burning since ancient times, and it hasn't stopped burning until now. Now, that place is the most desired place for our royal family, but only those who have made great contributions are qualified to comprehend it. The ancient books of our royal family once mentioned that there are countless ghost heart flames burning in the Dark Palace all year round. Our ancestors spent a lot of effort, but only managed to bring back one. Moreover, it is said that they were cursed by the gods, and died not long after that. Princess Tianqing was still incomparably shocked. I didn't believe it at first. It was just nonsense. The ghost heart flame is a very rare treasure even in the Azura clan. I wouldn't have even heard of it if we didn't have one burning in our palace. I didn't expect that the ancient books of the royal family would actually be true. Then, is there any record in the ancient books of your royal family? Who is this person? Yi Shiwen pointed to the figure sitting on the throne and said, There are no records. However, according to the records in our imperial family's ancient records, our founding ancestor once left behind a message. According to that speculation, it is very possible that this person is the deceased Darkness Master. It seems that after experiencing a great battle with a powerful enemy, he finally died in the Darkness Palace. Princess Tianqing guessed. Yi Shiwen suddenly sucked in a mouthful of cold air. What kind of existence was the Dark Lord? He was a god. He had heard a lot about the fallen gods. He had even joined hands with Yemo to kill a god, and had cheated him of his benefits. However, he had never seen the true body of a god. If it was true, then he had really struck it rich this time. Compared to the corpse of a deity, the ghost heart flame was nothing. Even if he had twice as much, it still wouldn't be able to compare to the corpse of a deity. What was a god? It was the greatest existence in the world. It was an immortal life that transcended the three realms, and didn't belong to the five elements. The laws of the world couldn't do anything to such a great existence. Their flesh itself was the most mystical existence in the world. However, Yi Shiwen looked at the corpse sitting cross-legged on the throne. It seemed that it had begun to wither and become thin. It seemed that, after countless years, even the corpse of a god had begun to be corroded by time. Something is wrong. Yi Shiwen immediately discovered that something was wrong. If it is a god, then it is absolutely impossible for it to decay. A god is an existence that has already broken away from the shackles of life and death. It is an existence that is beyond the control of time. Even if they are dead, their flesh will absolutely not decay. Their flesh will also exist eternally, and live as long as the world. The more powerful an expert was, the longer they could last after they passed away. For a life that had already transcended the mortal world like a god, there was no such thing as decay. Their words were the law. Even when they died, the laws on their body would automatically draw the power of the world, and form a natural tomb. It was enough to bury any expert below the Tao confirmation realm. Even if it was a dead god, their corpses couldn't be approached. They couldn't be desecrated. Even if they were dead, the laws around their bodies were enough to kill a profound death realm expert. However, he couldn't see any signs of a divine kingdom. Although there were countless ghost heart flames, which seemed very impressive, it still didn't make sense. That's not right. This is indeed a god. Yimo's voice sounded. Gods are immortal and eternal because they have formed their own divine kingdom. That is their own world. In that world, they have formed their own rules and laws. They have integrated into their own divine kingdom, so they are not controlled by the laws of the outside world. Thus, they have jumped out of the three realms and are no longer within the five elements. This is also the Tao confirmation realm, and they have broken away from the control of life and death. However, the laws on this Dark Lord's body have completely collapsed. He was forcefully shattered by someone, which is why he has become like this. I can still feel some remnant aura of the laws. Although there isn't much left, it is still terrifying. Said Umo, if we speculate from this, everything makes sense. How can there be so many ghost heart flames here? Other than a god like the Dead Spirit Lord who controls the dead spirits and her subordinates, how can anyone else collect so many ghost heart flames? I'm afraid that these ghost heart flames are also used by the Dark Lord to suppress evil and ward off ghosts. Yemo squinted his eyes and said, the more powerful an expert is, the more difficult it is for him to turn into a zombie after he passes away. However, once it happens, it will be a great disaster. After those evil spirits are born, they will become another kind of evil life. Once they are born, it will be a disaster for all the world. Originally, this is impossible for a god to exist. Even if they pass away, the laws on their bodies are enough to suppress all evil spirits, so they don't have to worry about this at all. However, the laws on the Dark Lord's body have been shattered by someone. Although the probability is very small, it is still possible for him to turn into a zombie. This is something that no immortal expert can tolerate. It has nothing to do with righteousness or evil. Such a great and noble creature will never allow its body to be desecrated and controlled by those lowly existences. And the ghost heart flames are the best item to suppress evil and ward off ghosts. With the suppression of the ghost heart flames, there won't be any accidents. No wonder. Yemo's tone was filled with a sense of enlightenment. Yi Shiwen was deeply shocked. He might not have known how terrifying an undying titled king expert was in the past. However, he could feel it now. Just an abyssal demon master that had yet to attain Tao validation had already turned the entire ancient Baron's continent upside down. It was as though he was about to conquer the entire ancient Baron's continent. Such an expert's laws were shattered by someone, his own divine kingdom was shattered, and he passed away miserably here. Who could possess such tyrannical strength? Yi Shiwen felt his blood boiling just thinking about it. There were still so many powerful experts in this world. His journey had only just begun. Beside him, Princess Tianqing took a big stride forward. She stretched out her hand and was about to grab a large amount of the ghost heart flames. Before Yi Shiwen could stop her, he heard a scream. Then, he saw Princess Tianqing being sent flying by a powerful rebound. If Yi Shiwen hadn't caught her, she would have been sent flying out of the hall. Humph! Yi Mo sneered in disdain. These ghost heart flames have already been arranged into an extremely powerful array. They are one with the entire treasury. If you want to attack the ghost heart flames, you will have to attack the entire hall and the entire treasury. How can you succeed? Yi Mo, haven't you always said that you want a physical body? What do you think about the Lord of Darkness? Chapter 1864. Yi Shiwen looked around and saw that the ghost heart fire in the entire hall had completely linked up to form a natural array formation. This array formation had borrowed the power of the world and was extremely marvelous. Even after countless years, it still possessed considerable power. The power of heaven and earth was the most vast and boundless. Nothing could go against the power of heaven and earth, not even the god. The Lord of Darkness had ignited so many ghost heart flames. It was probably not only to suppress evil and avoid ghosts, but also to prevent powerful living creatures from approaching. No wonder both Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian didn't do anything even though they knew it was the corpse of an expert. It turned out to be because of this reason. Otherwise, he didn't believe that the two of them would let go of such a great benefit. Yemo, didn't you always say that you want a body? What do you think about the Lord of Darkness? Yi Shiwen suddenly had a thought. The reason why the corpses of these powerhouses were so terrifying was because these powerhouses were already very powerful even after death. Therefore, once their corpses developed intelligence, they would quickly become very powerful and bring disaster to an area. On the other hand, if Yemo could enter the body of the Lord of Darkness, wouldn't he be able to quickly become a powerful fighting force? Yemo's eyes lit up when he heard this. Although the Lord of Darkness's laws and divine kingdom had fallen to the bottom, he could quickly become a powerful fighting force if he could enter the body. It would be much easier for him to take revenge on the Lord of the Abyss. Yemo still couldn't let go of Yulian's death. However, if the Lord of Darkness's laws and divine kingdom hadn't been destroyed, he wouldn't have had the chance to enter the body. He would have been destroyed on the spot if he had approached it. A tool spirit like him didn't have a physical body. He was like a wandering ghost. If he dared to approach it, he would definitely be killed instantly. Boom! 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 At the other end of the hall, explosions could be heard. The fight between Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian was still going on, and it wasn't over yet. Both of them fought deep into the hall, as if they were really going to fight to the death. They didn't have any intention of stopping. But these ghost heart flames are probably the biggest problem now. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said with a slight headache, a formation arranged by a deity-level master could be said to be flawless. It was simply impossible to rush into such a formation. Yi Shiwen, you're not thinking of rushing in, are you? At this time, Princess Tianqing had just barely managed to calm down the surging blood and qi caused by the collision with the ghost heart fire. Yes. Yi Shiwen didn't hide it and quickly nodded. Indeed, this is a formation left behind by a deity. It should have been flawless, and even I have no way of forcing my way in. But do you remember that Princess Tianqing said that her ancestor once obtained a ghost heart flame from here? In other words, this formation is no longer flawless. Although it's a little troublesome, I still have a way. Yemo gave a definite answer. That's great. If you can enter the flesh shell of the Lord of Darkness, then you will quickly become a formidable fighting force. Yi Shiwen said excitedly. Theoretically, that's true. However, you shouldn't expect too much. I won't be able to display the basic fighting strength of a deity even if I enter this godly shell. That's because all of its principles have been shattered. So, it's only at the level of a tyrannical body at most. Yemo poured a bucket of cold water on Yi Shiwen. He seemed to know what Yi Shiwen was thinking. Yi Shiwen was a little disappointed. It was just as Yemo had thought. He had thought that Yemo would be able to quickly master the physical body of the Lord of Darkness and display powerful combat power. He might even be able to reach the level of a god. If that was the case, he would be able to immediately look for the Abyss Devil Master to settle the score. Even if the Abyss Devil Master had proven himself, there was nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, judging from Yemo's expression, it was impossible for that to happen. I'll have to wait until I take control of this divine shell before I know what kind of combat power I can unleash. Moreover, even if I take control of the divine shell, I'll have to restart my cultivation step by step, Guillermo said calmly. He had not yet been overwhelmed by these things. However, I need you to use that mysterious space to deduce the mysteries of this formation, Guillermo said. All right. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and immediately began to deduce. This was a formation set up by a deity. Even if it was just a simple deduction, it would consume a large amount of spiritual qi. Thus, it would be burned to ashes in an instant. At the same time, Yi Shiwen's understanding of the formation continued to rise. Although he did not specialize in the formation, he still had some understanding of the formation. However, he was surprised to find that his cultivation base was showing signs of breaking through just by deducing the array formation Tao. As the saying goes, mastering one method leads to all methods. His cultivation and understanding of the formation continued to rise, and he actually showed signs of a breakthrough. Thinking of this, he was no longer in a hurry to intervene in the battle between Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian. Instead, he continued to try his best to deduce the mysterious formation. Princess Tianqing looked at the person beside her in astonishment. She could not believe it. He seemed to be deducing something. Every minute and every second there was an amazing change in his body. This change was constantly reflected in his aura, improving his temperament and making him more confident. He did not know what kind of enlightenment could make his temperament change so much in such a short time. Then, she saw Yi Shiwen walking step by step towards the ghost heart fire formation. 1 step, 2 steps. Although it was not a lot, she was surprised to find that Yi Shiwen did not seem to be rejected by the ghost heart fire formation. On the contrary, he seemed to be faintly integrated with it. She was shocked because she knew very well how much this formation repelled outsiders. It could even be said that there was no way to get close to it, but Yi Shiwen was actually able to get close to it step by step, and pass through the entire ghost heart fire formation. For her, it was like seeing a miracle. Around Yi Shiwen, there seemed to be many miracles happening at any time. However, these miracles were constantly shocking her soul. He was constantly completing one thing after another. In her opinion, it should be impossible for him to complete things. He was simply a monster. Yes, at this time, it seemed that the best way to describe him was to call him a monster. She looked at Yi Shiwen with a complicated look in her eyes. Finally, she made up her mind and left. She flew directly towards the passage in the other corner of the hall, as if she knew something. While Yi Shiwen was constantly deducing the entire ghost heart fire formation, he was also paying attention to the situation around him at the same time. This kind of multitasking was not a problem for him. Seeing that Princess Tianqing was leaving, he did not stop her. He understood that Princess Tianqing had promised a lot of benefits in order to get him on board. How could she not have any ulterior motives? It was just that she was not plotting against him. In the treasure house of the Lord of Darkness, there must be something that she really needed. Even the divine artifact of the nation could not be used to obtain it. Sooner or later, their alliance would be separated. There was nothing strange about that. Moreover, he could not separate himself at this time. He could only wholeheartedly deduce the mystery of the ghost heart fire formation. This was related to whether Guillermo could enter the Lord God's shell. For him, it was related to the future fight against the Abyss Devil Lord. It was extremely important. Compared to this, Jun Dingtian and Qin Lai were nothing. 1 step, 1 step, 1 step. He constantly shuttled through the ghost heart fire formation. Every step he took represented that his understanding of the formation and the formation Tao had climbed to a whole new level. His speed was shockingly fast, as if he didn't stop at all. He passed through step by step, but at the same time, the amount of spiritual energy in his body had also reached a shocking level. Even for a prodigal like him who often wasted money, he still felt the pain in his heart. Although it was not as much as when he was deducing the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist, It was enough to slowly dry up his wealth. The more he deduced, the more shocked he became. The more he understood the power of the Lord of Darkness. Even if he could only deduce a little bit of the God's strength through the formation Tao, it was already shocking enough. One by one, the dragon veins, the wealth that he felt could not be depleted in the past, was madly burning at an alarming speed at this time. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, he finally passed through the entire Ghost Heart Fire formation. The moment he passed through the Ghost Heart Fire formation, a powerful pressure swept over, causing him to wake up in an instant. At that moment, he seemed to see the Lord of Darkness coming back to life and looking at him. Instantly, he broke out in a cold sweat and felt a chill down his back. If the Lord of Darkness was still alive, he would probably collapse with just one look. He took a look again and realized that the wealth in the heavenly Yuan territory had almost been depleted. However, at the same time, he had completely grasped the mysteries of the Ghost Heart Fire formation. Otherwise, he would not have been able to integrate it. Hence, although he had exhausted a large amount of wealth, he still felt that it was worth it. After comprehending the formation, he felt that his cultivation realm had been greatly improved. He could vaguely feel that he had reached the profound death realm. This was a sign that he had completely reached the peak of the profound life realm. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. At this moment, a shocking demonic aura in his body turned into a figure and directly rushed into the divine shell of the Lord of Darkness on the throne. Chapter 1865. The moment Yimo charged into the god's shell, a powerful beam of light burst out from the god's shell and enveloped the entire area. Damn it, Yi Shiwen. This is bad. This divine shell has already given birth to spiritual intelligence. Yimo's voice came from inside. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt cold sweat dripping down his back. This divine shell had actually given birth to spiritual intelligence. In other words, there was a possibility of a corpse coming back to life. If the corpse of a god came back to life, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if it wasn't as terrifying as it was when it was alive, it could still easily tear him apart. Then, the entire divine shell burst out with deathly energy and demonic energy. Yi Shiwen could tell that the demonic energy belonged to Yimo. As for the remaining deathly energy, it was clear that it belonged to the spiritual wisdom of the Lord of Darkness. Even though the spiritual intelligence was still very weak, it was born from the body itself. It was the natural master. Yimo was an outsider. At this moment, it was very easy for him to be expelled. The human body was originally very complicated. It contained the truth of the universe. Even an absolute powerhouse would have to face many taboos if they wanted to take over the body. They might even suffer a counterattack and perish. At this moment, Yimo and the new spiritual intelligence collided. The strength of both parties wasn't strong enough to burst the body of the Lord of Darkness. Instead, they treated this place as a battlefield. Yimo's entry seemed to have disrupted the rhythm of the original spiritual intelligence. However, the deathly aura that represented the spiritual intelligence still had the absolute upper hand. Just as Yi Shiwen was in shock, he suddenly saw the corpse that was originally sitting cross-legged on the throne with its eyes closed, suddenly jumped out, and a big hand directly grabbed Yi Shiwen's neck. The steel-like big hand tore the space apart. It seemed as if it was going to smash the entire world into pieces in an instant. Yi Shiwen was startled. He quickly stepped on the golden waves, and his figure flickered unceasingly. He leaped into the Ghost Heart Fire array behind him. This big hand followed him like a shadow. No matter how Yi Shiwen tore the space, or how he dodged, it was useless. He couldn't avoid it. He could only see this big hand getting closer and closer. Just when Yi Shiwen was about to be grabbed by this huge hand, he suddenly saw that the body of the Lord of Darkness was suddenly covered by endless demon energy. Dense demon energy erupted, and the huge hand stopped in midair. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but gasp for breath. His neck was almost broken. This was the immortal's corpse. Even without the protection of the law, it was still an indestructible and untainted existence. Even if it was his tyrant body, if he was caught, his neck would be broken on the spot. There was no other possibility. He could tell that Yemo was fighting with the spiritual intelligence for control of the physical body. At this moment, Yemo's sudden outburst had allowed him to gain control of the physical body of the Lord of Darkness. Indeed, not long after, more deathly aura emerged from the body of the Master of Darkness, and it regained the upper hand. Yi Shiwen, the spiritual intelligence in the divine shell, is about to take shape. Moreover, it is about to fuse with the divine shell, said Yemo. There was a bit of anxiety in his voice. Isn't it said that the ghost heart fire is protecting it to suppress evil and ward off ghosts? So, it won't produce any evil things? Asked Yi Shiwen. I don't know. Something must have gone wrong. However, it is precisely because of the protection of the ghost heart fire. Otherwise, it would have turned into a corpse after such a long time. Yemo also didn't know what exactly went wrong that allowed the spiritual intelligence to be born in the divine shell. The real priority now is to suppress this spiritual intelligence. Otherwise, even I will be devoured by it and become its nutrient. On the contrary, if I can devour it, I can fuse with it. In that case, the divine shell won't reject me. In that case, the time for me to completely control the divine shell will be greatly reduced. Let's do it. Yi Shiwen immediately took action without any hesitation. A seal word burst out from his body and turned into a huge shadow. It was about to grab the divine shell of the Lord of Darkness. However, in an instant the surrounding rules were torn apart. He couldn't help but look a bit shocked. This was the first time that his seal word had completely failed. Yi Shiwen, your pseudo-Dao runes are useless. Pseudo-Dao runes are condensed by people who haven't reached the Dao realm. It is impossible to use the martial arts comprehension of people who haven't reached the Dao realm to suppress a Dao realm powerhouse, shouted Yemo hurriedly. Although the pseudo-Dao runes possessed some of the abilities of Dao runes, they weren't real Dao runes. It was impossible to suppress a Dao realm powerhouse with them. Yi Shiwen squinted his eyes. Countless thoughts flashed in his mind as he thought of the best solution. Hurry up. If this goes on, I will be devoured by him, said Yemo. Yi Shiwen suddenly thought of something. He pinched his finger and a page of scripture flew out of his body. It turned into the image of a huge deity and poured into the body of the Lord of Darkness. Suddenly, golden light shone brightly and the deathly aura that was getting stronger and stronger was suppressed. This was the page of ancient God scripture in Yi Shiwen's body. This page of ancient God scripture that he had obtained from the fifth god had a great origin. At that time, it was rumored that it was an ancient scripture left behind by a deity. It recorded the comprehension of a deity. Yi Shiwen still had some doubts at that time. However, he didn't have any doubts at this time. This was the only possibility. Only the existence of a deity could suppress a deity. With the help of the ancient God scripture, Yemo had gained a firm foothold in the body of the Lord of Darkness. He was no longer in a situation where he was losing ground. In terms of the strength of the divine consciousness, this spiritual wisdom had been nurtured for tens of thousands of years. It had gradually taken root in the entire body of the Lord of Darkness. If it was allowed to continue developing like this, it wouldn't take long for it to come back to life and become a powerhouse of the next generation. It was a pity that it had met Yi Shiwen and Yemo. Whether it was to enter the Lord of Darkness's shell or to survive and prevent the Lord of Darkness's shell from coming back to life, they would never allow this spiritual wisdom to continue developing like this. Rumble! 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 In the body of the Lord of Darkness, there were continuous loud explosions. Both sides had directly used the body of the Lord of Darkness as a battlefield. They were constantly fighting. This was the most fundamental competition of strength. Both sides had their own advantages. The spiritual wisdom of the Lord of Darkness had taken root in the body of the Lord of Darkness. It was born with a huge advantage. On the other hand, Yemo was experienced. He was an old devil who had lived for God knows how many years. In addition, he had the help of the ancient God Scripture. He was the best at restraining such evil beings. For a time, both sides were evenly matched, and there was no difference between them at all. Yi Shiwen, you don't have to worry about us. This guy is very difficult to deal with, but I can handle it. With the help of the ancient God Scripture, I already have a way to suppress him. With the protection of the Ghost Heart Flame formation, I believe no one can break in. Therefore, you don't have to watch. Go and look for the country of Darkness's divine weapon. That country of Darkness's divine weapon is crucial for me to deal with the Abyss Devil Master in the future. It must not fall into the hands of Jun Dingtian. Yemo's voice came from the body of the Lord of Darkness. Yi Shiwen looked at the situation in the body of the Lord of Darkness. The Devil Chi and Death Chi occupied half of the body of the Lord of Darkness. In the end, he agreed with Yemo. At this time, the only ones who could decide the outcome of the battle were themselves. He couldn't intervene at all. Moreover, this place was completely surrounded by the Ghost Heart Fire Array. So, other people simply couldn't come in. Not everyone had the ability and financial resources of Yi Shiwen. He had actually deduced the mysteries of the entire Ghost Heart Fire Array. Thinking of this, he did not stay any longer. He tore the space apart and passed through the Ghost Heart Fire formation. Then, he flew towards the direction where Qin Lai and Jun Dingtian were fighting. At this time, he had already seen through all the mysteries of the Ghost Heart Fire formation, so he did not have any scruples at all. At this time, the battle between Jun Dingtian and Qin Lai seemed to be about to end. Qin Lai's aura was also getting weaker. Although his strength was not bad, and the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist was even more magical. He could even fight against an ordinary expert at the peak of the Profound Life realm. However, it was obvious that Jun Dingtian was not an ordinary expert at the peak of the Profound Life realm. His strength was also far beyond the existence of the same realm. In just a short while, Yi Shiwen had arrived at the battlefield of the two sides. The other side of the hall had been completely turned into a battlefield. The entire hall had been destroyed by the two sides. In the void, there was a huge flag fluttering in the air. It was a gloomy flag that was completely black. It was a strange black color that made people feel like they were being sucked into it with just a glance. This flag was constantly emitting waves of fluctuations. These waves of fluctuations directly affected the surrounding space, causing the surrounding space to form a special domain, completely isolating itself from the surroundings. Around this flag, two figures were constantly colliding in the void. Their speed was so fast that it couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Yi Shiwen directly directed his chi to his eyes and opened his heavenly eye. At a glance, he could see that the two colliding figures were none other than Jun Dingtian and Qin Lai. Bang! With a loud roar, Qin Lai was directly blasted away. He directly crashed into the ground of the hall, creating a big hole. Chapter 1866. Puff! Qin Lai spat out a mouthful of blood. His body twitched a few times on the ground, but he was unable to get up in the end. His body was extraordinary as well. The powerful body cultivation technique from the martial great sect made him almost invincible among his peers. Who would have expected that he would suffer such a huge loss in the hands of Jun Dingtian? Jun Dingtian's background was unknown. Even Princess Tianqing, whom Yi Shiwen thought was omnipotent, was unknown. Yet, he was able to completely suppress these geniuses. One could only imagine how tyrannical his strength was. Compared to Yi Shiwen, Jun Dingtian was more like an unorthodox person with no inheritance. After all, Yi Shiwen was from the Yi family, so he was not completely without a master. Only Jun Dingtian's background was unknown to everyone. Otherwise, the major forces would not be so surprised by Jun Dingtian's strength. Although they did not know where Jun Dingtian came from, it was not difficult to guess that he must have a very powerful inheritance. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to compete with Qin Lai and the others. Beside Qin Lai, the other martial arts grandmaster experts had already fallen to the ground and were wailing in pain. They had been completely defeated in the previous battle. If it were not for Qin Lai, they would not have been able to hold on until now. They would have been completely annihilated. Overconfident. Jun Dingtian sneered disdainfully. He did not take these martial great sect people seriously at all. You. The faces of the people from the martial organization turned red with anger. Wherever they went, they were treated as the pride of the heavens. No matter what kind of power they were from, no one dared to look down on them, let alone treat them as trash. Overestimating one's capabilities. They often said these words, but at this moment, it sounded so sarcastic and sullen. Qin Lai, in particular, clenched his fists. He was unwilling to give up. They were one level apart, just one level apart. But it was this one level that separated him from Jun Dingtian. He would never be able to catch up with Jun Dingtian. He had fought with all his might, but he had only received the evaluation of overestimating himself. It was as if the two of them were not on the same level at all. Even a person like him would end up being overconfident in Jun Dingtian's eyes. If he stepped into the peak of the profound life stage, everything would be completely different. Jun Dingtian didn't even look at them. His eyes were all on the flag in the void. That flag was constantly emitting an astonishing aura that spread out in all directions. Jun Dingtian was a little confused. Whoosh! He directly grabbed out a huge hand from the void, covering the sky and covering the earth as he grabbed the flag, wanting to subdue the flag. However, this flag instantly surged with a boundless aura. Almost in an instant, it automatically flew up and blasted towards the giant hand. Boom! The shockingly huge hand was directly penetrated by the flag. Interesting! Jun Dingtian sneered. He directly grabbed out and attacked the flag again. However, at this moment, a gigantic golden sword appeared out of thin air and slashed down, slashing towards the gigantic hand. Bang! There was a loud collision sound, as if two huge iron blocks collided in the void. The giant hand and the sword collided. Who is it? Jun Dingtian reacted almost immediately. His eyes were as sharp as a blade. He directly swept over and instantly found Yi Shiwen, who was hiding at the side. Or rather, at this point, Yi Shiwen had no intention of continuing to hide. Yi Shiwen. At this time, Qin Lai and the rest of the martial sect people were surprised and happy to see Yi Shiwen. No matter what, Yi Shiwen's appearance would not be to help Jun Dingtian. For them, this was no different from a huge surprise. It's you. Jun Dingtian's eyes were cold as he stared at Yi Shiwen. He had seen how Yi Shiwen had slaughtered everyone in the Divine Union, but he did not care. He and Yi Shiwen cared about different things from the beginning. There was no need to make such a tyrannical enemy for no reason. However, given his character, he naturally would not retreat since he had already fought his way to the front door. Yi Shiwen, don't tell me you think that you are a match for me just because you killed some Divine Union trash? There was an inexplicable smile at the corner of Jun Dingtian's mouth, as if he was mocking Yi Shiwen for overestimating himself. Be it Yi Shiwen or Qin Lai, these peerless geniuses in the eyes of ordinary people seemed so laughable and immature in his eyes. It was a kind of contempt based on the level of life, which had nothing to do with one's strength. It was like a noble son of a rich family looking down on a commoner. The innate sense of superiority had penetrated into his bones, and he looked down on everyone. Yi Shiwen didn't know where Jun Dingtian's confidence came from. Whether it was him or Qin Lai, no one dared to look down on them for being able to reach this stage at such a young age. No one would look down on them no matter if they loved or hated them. However, Jun Dingtian was looking down on them. This was not an act, nor was it from a powerful warrior looking down on a weaker person. It was a sense of superiority based on the level of life. It seems that you are tired of living and have come to die. His voice rumbled like thunder. The entire void seemed to be on the verge of collapsing under his voice, causing the surroundings to tremble. Yi Shiwen's eyes narrowed. This was a strong opponent, a very strong opponent. Jun Dingtian stood with his hands behind his back, like a reincarnated god. Even his body had a bit of divinity which was so dazzling that people could not look at him directly. He was cold and emotionless, looking at everything coldly. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen seemed to be dead. At this time, Qin Lai and the others, who were lying on the ground and seriously injured, were even more shocked. They had been suppressed by Jun Dingtian's aura to the point that they could not breathe. If they were in good condition, they might be able to resist, but at this time, it seemed that even breathing was very difficult for them. Especially Qin Lai, he was even more shocked. This was the true peak state of Jun Dingtian. Jun Dingtian had only shown his true strength at the end of the battle, and now he was in such a state as soon as he attacked. He intended to kill Yi Shiwen in one go. The rest of the martial arts grandmasters were even more frightened. Even when the battle was at its most intense, they could not really guess how powerful Jun Dingtian was. He was like an invincible god. Even when facing the joint attack of so many martial arts grandmasters and Qin Lai, they could not do anything to him. Although this was because none of them were at the peak of the profound life realm, martial grandmasters were immortal inheritances. No one knew how many unique skills in the martial grandmasters could enhance their combat power. Although it was not as exquisite as the heavenly Emperor Divine Fist, it was enough to run amok in a region. Even so, they could not do anything to Jun Dingtian. They even suspected that even if there were experts at the peak of the profound life realm present, they would not be a match for him. He stood there alone, his whole body glowing, illuminating the entire hall. At this time, Yi Shiwen just snorted and took a step forward, instantly destroying Jun Dingtian's aura. His figure was like a small boat in a raging storm and huge waves. In front of him were raging waves, but everywhere he passed was calm and tranquil. He had completely suppressed Jun Dingtian's aura all by himself. Interesting. The corner of Jun Dingtian's mouth twitched slightly. It seems that you have made up your mind to die. He squinted his eyes. His eyes were full of killing intent. His blood was boiling, powerful and cold. Die? Just you? I'm afraid you can't do it. Yi Shiwen seemed to ignore Jun Dingtian's powerful aura. He did not care at all. He just sneered. At this time, these martial grandmasters were shocked by Yi Shiwen's words. Just you? I'm afraid you can't do it. After witnessing Jun Dingtian's tyrannical strength, few people could say such words. Even a genius like Qin Lai had suffered a great loss in the hands of Jun Dingtian. They even dared to say that among the younger generation, there were not many who could compare with Jun Dingtian. Even most of the older generation of warriors would be killed by Jun Dingtian without any suspense. Was he too arrogant, or too confident? Whether I can do it or not, we'll know once we try. Jun Dingtian seemed to have no intention to continue wasting time. His eyes were like two sharp swords that shot out, piercing through people's souls. At this moment, a powerful aura swept over like a stormy sea. At this moment, he finally made his move. Whoosh! A shocking sword light slashed horizontally, instantly tearing the vast sky, causing cracks to appear in the void. The sword light surged, looking like a sword that could destroy the world. This sword was extremely fast, as if it was faster than the speed of light. In an instant, it had arrived in front of Yi Shiwen, as if it was going to completely pierce through Yi Shiwen. Those martial grandmasters could not help but exclaim in disbelief. Was Yi Shiwen going to be killed in one move? This was not impossible. In a fight between peak experts, It was not uncommon to see an instant kill. The difference in strength could be determined with a single move. At this moment, Yi Shiwen had already made his move. His hand pulled out a virtual shadow, grabbing a golden long sword, and directly slashed at the sword light. Chapter 1867. Dang! With a deafening roar, the two sides collided, causing the sword chi to overflow in all directions. The sword chi engulfed the mountains and rivers as it swept in all directions, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Yi Shiwen's golden long sword and Jun Dingtian's sword aura collided fiercely. Sparks flew in all directions, and a clanging sound was heard. The sky directly collapsed, and chaos was split apart. The people of martial sect were shocked. They were shocked by Jun Dingtian's tyrannical strength. They were also shocked by Yi Shiwen's tyrannical strength. He was able to withstand the attack without any damage. He was like a rock, indestructible and unshakable. At the same time, they were shocked that the first wave of battle between the two sides was already so violent. It was unbelievable. Compared to the current battle, even when they besieged Jun Dingtian, they did not cause such a terrifying scene. And at this time, there were already many people in the main hall. Many people heard the sound of the battle and directly came to see such a shocking scene. It was simply shocking. They didn't dare to believe it. Was this really the combat strength that ordinary people could have? The peak of the profound life realm. They have already climbed to the peak of the profound life realm, and I'm afraid they are about to touch the profound death realm. Someone said while trembling with fear. Yi Shiwen had fought against two opponents at the same time, and he had blocked Zhan Ming and Chu Yun's peerless ferocity. They had all seen him as invincible. In fact, they had already listed him as the person that they should not provoke. Now, they saw Jun Dingtian fighting Yi Shiwen to a standstill. This person must be a monster. Although they were all shocked, they had seen different battles before, so the emotions in their hearts were completely different from those of the people from the martial sect. Among the younger generation, I'm afraid these two people are the best. Many people said with emotion, especially the old monsters like them. They had cultivated for many years, but at this time, they were surpassed by the younger generation who had not cultivated for many years. At this time, their feelings were unusually complicated. You have some strength, but it's useless. If you did not provoke me, you might be able to live well. Unfortunately, since you have provoked me, you can't live anymore. Jun Dingtian sneered and exuded an arrogant and wild aura. He still did not put Yi Shiwen in his eyes. He didn't even take the heroes of the world seriously. I'll cut off your head. Jun Dingtian attacked again. He pointed his sword at Yi Shiwen and charged at him. Yi Shiwen didn't know what kind of inheritance he had obtained for his agility technique. His speed was also extremely fast. In an instant, he directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. With each step, he crushed a part of the sky. Killing intent covered the sky and covered the earth. Boom! The momentum was like the collapse of Mount Tai, directly crushing over, and instantly chopping over. The sword talisman floating on the sword light directly formed a sword river, as if crossing the river of time, sweeping over. Battle intent pierced through the entire sky, causing everyone in the distance to feel a chill run down their spines, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them. This kind of combat power was something they might not be able to achieve even if they cultivated for 1,000 or 10,000 years. Both of them were the strongest competitors on the road to becoming a martial artist. Yi Shiwen also attacked. The golden sword did not give way at all, and the tip of the sword directly pierced over. Ordinary people, even if they were also experts in the profound life realm, would find it extremely difficult to keep up with the eyes. It was as if the sword had transcended space and time, but Yi Shiwen could actually keep up with such speed. Boom! The two long swords collided in the void. Yi Shiwen completely blocked the sword, and at the moment when he blocked the sword, a monstrous sword intent condensed from his body, and then instantly cut through the sky, slashing towards Jun Dingtian. This was him directly forcing out the sword intent that was originally simulated by the special space in his body, directly forcing it to cut towards Jun Dingtian. Jun Dingtian did not fall into a disadvantageous position at all. There was an amazing sword intent in his eyes, directly colliding with Yi Shiwen's sword intent. Surprisingly, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position at all. This was a situation that Yi Shiwen had never encountered before. In the past, even if there were opponents who could suppress him in terms of strength, there was absolutely no one who could compete with him in terms of sword intent. Because he already knew that his sword intent was actually left behind by a king in the past. Even if he had only simulated a small part of it, it was still enough to shock people. You want to fight against me with such insignificant skills? Jun Dingtian sneered disdainfully. At this time, after several collisions with Yi Shiwen, he had already discovered that Yi Shiwen's strength was extremely tyrannical, far surpassing the ordinary experts in the peak of the profound life realm. Although he was still very confident in himself, he would not completely look down on Yi Shiwen like before. Because at this time, if he looked down on Yi Shiwen again, he would be looking down on himself. Yi Shiwen was nothing, and he, who could not defeat Yi Shiwen in 2 moves, was nothing. The collision between the two immediately caused the sword intent to overflow, directly collapsing into stars. In this gloomy hall, as if the night had fallen, the stars twinkled, and the entire sky was directly enveloped by the sword intent. Both of them had supreme sword principles, and were also the top experts in their respective realms. Deng deng deng. Yi Shiwen continuously took a few steps back, and opposite him, Jun Dingtian also directly took a few steps back. In this collision, both sides could be said to be evenly matched. Insignificant skills? If you think this is insignificant, then you can only deceive yourself and others. Yi Shiwen could not help but find it funny and said coldly. In his heart there was a little bit of horror. Although he had long known that Jun Dingtian's strength was probably very strong, he absolutely did not expect it to be to such an extent. He had definitely touched the threshold of the profound death realm, and his strength was far superior to ordinary experts at the peak of the profound life realm. If it was not for his continuous comprehension in the ghost heart fire formation, and his understanding of martial arts had improved by leaps and bounds compared to before, he would have been defeated directly by Jun Dingtian. No wonder he was so arrogant, because he indeed had such strength. Even if Qin Lai stepped into the peak of the profound life realm, he would probably not be a match for him. Zhan Ming and Chu Yun would probably be defeated by this person even if they joined forces. Among the younger generation, he had never seen such a tyrannical expert. The famous Zhan Ming, Chu Yun, Qin Lai, and the others were simply not enough in front of him. Glib words and stingy looks. Jun Dingtian was unmoved, and his eyes were incomparably cold. Almost in an instant, he took the initiative to attack again, and it was another ordinary stab. There was no trace of this move at all. Although it seemed to be an ordinary stab, it contained countless principles of sword arts, and could even change its trajectory in an instant. Therefore, in Yi Shiwen's eyes, it seemed to contain countless changes, and in an instant, his entire body was locked down. No matter how he tried to escape, he would be enveloped by this sword, and would be stabbed to death no matter where he escaped to. His sword arts have actually reached such a high level? Qin Lai was dumbfounded, and at this time, he was even more unwilling. He believed that he was not inferior to anyone in the younger generation. Even if Zhan Ming and Chu Yun were a level higher than him, he did not have the slightest bit of worry. He was born in the martial sect, an immortal inheritance that had once produced an emperor. Such a background was enough to make him proud, and it was enough for him to look down on all the heroes. However, he did not expect to suffer such a big loss in the hands of Jun Dingtian. Therefore, whenever he faced June Dingtian, he would always pay special attention. At this time, he had to admit that June Dingtian was indeed stronger than him, whether he was willing to admit it or not. Yi Shiwen's face was as calm as water. His eyes were like a torch that illuminated thousands of miles, as if he could see through all the changes of June Dingtian's sword arts, and he stabbed with his sword. Compared to June Dingtian, who only stabbed with his sword, Yi Shiwen's sword light almost drowned the entire sky in an instant, like a raging wave, drowning everything, including June Dingtian's sword. Boom! Another loud roar sounded, and in an instant, both sides collided in the void for 1,000 times, then 10,000 times. June Dingtian's sword light was very terrifying, and it could tear everything apart. However, it could not do anything against Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's sword light was not ordinary. It looked incomparably dazzling, but it was able to block June Dingtian's killing sword every time. His sword arts were like a raging wave, drowning everything. No matter how shocking the sword momentum was, it would be completely annihilated in front of his sword light. There was no other result. Everyone could see that both sides were simply evenly matched. June Dingtian was very strong, and Yi Shiwen was not the slightest bit inferior. They were going tit for tat. Many people had doubts in their hearts. Who exactly were these two people? To them, the sudden appearance of these two people was simply too sudden. Although Yi Shiwen had a bit of a reputation because of the previous conflict with the Divine Union, it did not match his strength at all. The same was true for June Dingtian. He had some fame, but no one would have thought that under that little bit of fame, there was such a terrifying strength hidden. He was a terrifying existence that could beat all the younger generation to the ground. In time, these two people will be the strongest on the road to proving themselves. Chapter 1868. That's right. Both of them should be geniuses who could prove their Tao in the future. It's been a long time since we've seen a Tao expert. I can't believe it. The skills of these two people have far surpassed many of the older generation of warriors. Many people sighed with emotion. Their strength was not good, but it did not mean that their insight was poor. Many of them had lived for thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years. Their insight could be said to be extremely sharp, and they could see through it at a glance. No, look, June Dingtian actually stopped. At this time, everyone saw that June Dingtian, who was originally attacking fiercely, suddenly stopped. Could it be that he realized that his fierce attack was useless, so he decided to give up? June Dingtian slowly put away the long sword in his hand, and stood proudly like a long spear. He said to Yi Shiwen coldly, "You should have just broken through. At this time, you actually dare to use me as your stepping stone, and use my sword energy to hone your realm. You're quite bold. Finally, you saw through me." Yi Shiwen said with a smile, "But it's useless, I've already completed the honing." Yes, Yi Shiwen was just using June Dingtian's pressure to make a quick breakthrough. The last time he saw June Dingtian, he did not have such strength. Now, he had already stepped into the peak of the profound life realm, and touched the barrier of the profound death realm. Unlike Yi Shiwen, who had just touched this realm, he was more like a veteran who had been immersed in this realm for countless years. Although he was not as sharp as Yi Shiwen, he was more experienced and mellow. This was the direction that Yi Shiwen would work towards in the future. He did not know how June Dingtian did it, but it was very clear that if he could not achieve it, then he was very likely to be defeated by June Dingtian. Therefore, he had to defeat June Dingtian within a limited time, and improve his strength to the same level as him. Now that he had reached the realm, all he needed was accumulation, and there was no time for him to do that. Everyone present was completely numb. They were almost scared to death. If they were in June Dingtian's shoes, they would have been killed by either of them. But Yi Shiwen could use June Dingtian's sword light to hone his cultivation. He was not a human, but a monster. Although this was also because the difference in their realms was similar, it was still very shocking. What a joke. Do you think you're my opponent just because you look like this? I haven't even used my full strength yet. Jun Dingtian's words shocked everyone. He hadn't even used his full strength. While everyone was still in shock, Jun Dingtian suddenly moved. His sword light instantly tore through the air. Swish! Wave after wave of sword light burst out of his body. Suddenly, countless sword principles manifested in his body. A heavy sword without a sharp edge, a skillful way of the sword. An incomparably sharp sword Dao that could pierce through everything. It was a sword Dao that could destroy heaven and earth. Any one of these sword Daos that could be chosen to reach the pinnacle of the Dao actually appeared in his body. It was common knowledge that the more complex a martial art was, the more difficult it would be to cultivate to the peak. Yi Shiwen was a pure freak. He was a weirdo. He had that mysterious space. So, he could quickly master any kind of martial art. Moreover, he could grasp the essence of it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to practice so casually. Perhaps, he would have chosen to practice in the direction of swordsmanship or bladesmanship. He was very clear that everyone's energy was limited. It was impossible to learn all the martial arts by himself. He didn't have the time to do so, unless he had a long time to verify them one by one after he proved Dao. Yi Shiwen saw all kinds of sword principles emerging all at once. There were as many as 3,000 sword principles. It was simply sensational. All the sword principles that Yi Shiwen had seen before could be found here. Even the sword principles that Yi Shiwen had never seen or heard of before could emerge from his body. How is this possible? At this time, even Yi Shiwen couldn't believe it. Any one of the sword principles here had great potential. If cultivated to the peak, there was a possibility of proving Dao. Moreover, the most important thing was that he could see that Jun Dingtian didn't just cultivate casually. He had clearly cultivated these sword principles to an astonishing level. He was more terrifying than any sword Dao genius that Yi Shiwen had seen before. Any ordinary person who cultivated to this level would be considered a genius, let alone so many of them gathered together. This meant that he alone was equivalent to 3,000 sword Dao geniuses. This was completely beyond Yi Shiwen's imagination. Even if he had the mysterious space, he couldn't do this. Although it was only a category of sword principles, he knew that he couldn't do it. It wasn't that the mysterious space couldn't do it, but he didn't have enough resources to cultivate. The mysterious space was very powerful, but it also had a fatal flaw. No matter what martial arts it deduced, it would consume a lot of resources. The more powerful the martial arts, the more resources it would consume. If any of the 3,000 sword Daos were to be cultivated to this level, even he would be completely impoverished. Moreover, it was impossible for him to cultivate the 3,000 sword principles. No matter how peerless a genius was, it was impossible for him to reach this level at his age, even if he cultivated and comprehended day and night. His face finally turned ugly. Jun Dingtian's level had completely exceeded his imagination. In fact, none of the opponents he had met before could be compared to Jun Dingtian. It wasn't the gap in strength, but the gap in the comprehension of martial arts. Zhan Ming and Chu Yun couldn't be compared to him at all. Qin Lai's face turned pale all of a sudden, as if the faith in his heart had collapsed. He was a proud person, and he had always felt that he was the best among his peers. Even when he was defeated by Jun Dingtian, he only felt that his realm was not as good as Jun Dingtian's. He did not think that he was inferior to Jun Dingtian. However, with Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles, he suddenly understood the gap between him and Jun Dingtian. It wasn't a gap in realm, but a gap in essence. Even if he had reached the peak of the profound life realm and touched the peak of the profound death realm, he was still not comparable to Jun Dingtian, who had comprehended the 3,000 sword principles. How could this be? How could this be? Was everything I insisted on before wrong? Qin Lai murmured to himself in disbelief. One could imagine the impact it had on his heart. He originally thought that he was in the same realm, but in fact, he was far ahead of him. It was like the difference between a car with 4 wheels and a top brand like a Bentley or Rolls-Royce. Qin Lai was greatly shocked, and the others were also in disbelief. If an old monster who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years had such cultivation and comprehension, they might be able to accept it. After all, it could be improved with time. However, although they couldn't accurately judge Jun Dingtian's age, they knew that he was definitely not more than 1,000 years old. If so, how powerful was his talent? It was simply unbelievable. Could there really be such a monster in this world? If Qin Lai, Yi Shiwen, and the others were geniuses, then Jun Dingtian was a monster that only appeared once in hundreds of thousands of years. It was terrifying, and it made people lose all confidence. Yi Shiwen's eyes were constantly flickering, and his body was also trembling. He had always been the one to shock others like this. He had the mysterious space, and ordinary geniuses were nothing in front of him. Just like Zhan Ming and Chu Yun, he was not afraid of anyone in the same realm. Today, he really saw what a monster was. Jun Dingtian could be so terrifying that it was enough to scare people to death. With the 3,000 sword principles, even experts in the profound death realm would not be a match for him. More importantly, from this, Yi Shiwen could see that Jun Dingtian's ambition was far beyond that of anyone he had met before. It was said that there were 3,000 great ways, and those who obtained one of them could attain eternal life. The sword principle was also one of the 3,000 great ways, and Jun Dingtian had cultivated the 3,000 great ways of the sword principle. Was he going to condense the 3,000 great ways of the sword principle? If this continued and he really succeeded, he would probably become a world-shocking expert. There was even a voice in his heart that told him that Jun Dingtian was even more terrifying than the Abyss Devil Lord. The only difference was that Jun Dingtian had not grown up yet. No wonder he didn't even look at Yi Shiwen, Qin Lai, and the others. It turned out that they were not at the same level. Would a human look at an ant? Although he was very unwilling to come to this conclusion, he could not deny that Jun Dingtian, who had condensed the 3,000 great ways of the sword principles, was indeed a monster. However, a sudden thought flashed in his mind. Such a tyrannical Jun Dingtian actually had an enemy, a female enemy. Just how tyrannical was this female enemy that Jun Dingtian was so afraid of? That was why Jun Dingtian had previously said that the people from the Heaven Wasteland Palace were not worthy to fight with this female enemy, and that she would kill them in an instant. Now that he thought about it, Kong Amping realized that Jun Dingtian was not exaggerating, but it was simply the truth. Thinking of this, he could not help but feel the blood in his body boiling. He did not expect that there would be so many experts among his peers, experts that were far beyond his imagination. It was getting more and more interesting, and he would not be so lonely anymore. Among my peers, you are the first one besides her to make me use the 3,000 sword principles. But to die under the 3,000 sword principles, you should be able to smile in the underworld. Chapter 1869. Seeing Jun Dingtian using the 3,000 great ways, everyone's faces suddenly turned pale. No matter which camp they were from, they couldn't help but be frightened when they saw such a monster. The strength of Yi Shiwen and Qin Lai was still within the scope of their understanding, but Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond their imagination. It could even be said that he was 100 times more terrifying than the most terrifying genius that they had imagined him to be. Whoosh! 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 One after another, the laws condensed and flew out. The 3,000 sword principles all manifested behind him, densely packed, covering the entire sky, shaking all directions. He stood in the void, and all the 3,000 sword principles condensed behind him, condensing into an incomparably powerful big sword. For a moment, the whole world was incomparably dark, and the sun and moon lost their light. All the Tao was suppressed, and some were even directly crushed. There was a terrible momentum, as if all the flowers were killed when the flower bloomed. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. He could feel that the increasingly terrifying aura was unceasingly crushing down on him. Even his qi was being suppressed and restrained by the net of lust. Such a terrible pressure almost immediately aroused Yi Shiwen's continuous resistance. The golden divinity in his body was unwilling to receive such pressure. It instantly boiled, burned wildly, and surged with a shocking momentum. It actually faintly resisted Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. Yi Shiwen is also very strong. Look, he can actually withstand the pressure of the 3,000 sword principles. It's already shocking to be able to do this. If it wasn't for Jun Dingtian, Yi Shiwen might even have a chance to prove his Tao. In the future, he might very well become a corpse on the road of proving his Tao. Yes, that's right. He can withstand it now, but he's already at his limit. When Jun Dingtian makes his move, I'm afraid Yi Shiwen will completely collapse on the spot. Even I feel a sense of fear just by looking at it from afar. You can imagine how terrifying the 3,000 sword principles are, and what kind of pressure Yi Shiwen is facing now. If it wasn't for the formation and barrier that the Lord of Darkness had set up, I'm afraid this battle would have ended in a complete collapse. But what's the origin of this Jun Dingtian? Yi Shiwen is somewhat famous, but I've never heard of this Jun Dingtian. He's a monster, he's a monster. You're able to withstand the coercion of my 3,000 sword principles. That alone is enough to put you at the top of your generation. Unfortunately, you've met me. I'm fundamentally different from you guys. Do you understand? Jun Dingtian seemed to be interested in talking to Yi Shiwen. It was rare for him to be willing to talk to Yi Shiwen. Different? What's the difference? Although I don't know which race you belong to, you're still far from it. Yi Shiwen stirred up the surging golden divinities to resist the coercion of Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. You're digging your own grave. I don't mind telling you how you think the Lord of Darkness died. He died in my hands. Jun Dingtian said coldly. Are you kidding me? I'm afraid the Lord of Darkness could kill you with just one look. Yi Shiwen had some doubts in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He sneered. Humph, how would you stupid mortals know that I'm the reincarnation of a deity? The Lord of Darkness died after my 3,000 sword principles broke his law and shattered his divine kingdom. How dare you compare yourselves to me? As my memory gradually recovers, I'll soon regain my previous strength. The gap between you and me will only get bigger and bigger. Jun Dingtian finally revealed a shocking secret. Everyone was stunned. They were a little scared out of their wits, not daring to believe what their ears had just heard. Reincarnation of a deity? Was there really a reincarnation of a deity in this world? Everyone couldn't believe it. They knew that deities existed, but they were just experts who had proven their Tao. However, that was a long, long time ago. Even in the Xian world, how many people had actually seen a deity? Even legends about deities were few and far between. Even if they were divine sons or those who had awakened the bloodline of the gods, they were already very rare, and these people were the experts who supported the entire profound world. These people were more or less related to the deities. They could become the top experts in the world by relying on some martial arts, magic treasures, or other wealth left by the deities. These people were only related to the deities. No one knew what the real reincarnation of a deity was like. Over the years, there had been all kinds of legends about the reincarnation of deities and goddesses. Many top geniuses were also crowned with the title of the reincarnation of a deity. However, it was often proven that these gimmicks were just gimmicks. They were not true at all. No one had ever really admitted that they were the reincarnation of a deity. At most, they had obtained some inheritance of a deity by chance. This was the first time they heard of such a thing. Once the news spread, the whole world would go crazy. No matter how reserved the experts in the Xian world were, they would go crazy when it was related to the Tao validation or deities. In the profound world, as long as it was related to Tao proving or eternal life, everyone would go crazy. Just like the inheritance of the Lord of Undead Spirits, even though everyone knew that most of them had no chance and might even die prematurely due to the corrosion of the death chi here, they still came here without hesitation because they had no other choice. They had no other choice but to give it their all. It was conceivable that once the news spread, even Jun Dingtian would be endlessly hunted down, unless he had the protection of a colossus like the Heaven Wasteland Palace. But for now, he didn't seem to have a strong background. He didn't understand it before, but now he seemed to be able to understand it. If he was really the reincarnation of a god, then he wouldn't need the guidance of others, nor would he need the protection of other forces. He could stand on his own. However, he hadn't grown up yet. So where did his confidence come from? Everyone was pondering over this question. Almost at this moment, everyone seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly, they were shocked. Could it be that he wants to slaughter all of us? Indeed, if everyone here were to die, then this news would naturally not be leaked. If they hadn't thought of this possibility before, they suddenly thought of it now. Based on the strength that Jun Dingtian had shown, it wasn't impossible. On the contrary, it was quite possible. Thinking of this, everyone's face suddenly turned pale. If Jun Dingtian really had such an idea, then they wouldn't be able to escape today, no matter what. With the cultivation of the 3,000 sword principles, even an expert in the profound death realm wouldn't be able to withstand it. I've seen too many of you so-called geniuses in my previous and current lives. Those who can truly cross the threshold of Tao validation are few and far between. Those who can't are all trash. Jun Dingtian said bluntly. That's right. For him, there was no such thing as a genius. The only difference was whether or not one could achieve Tao validation. Everything else was the same. They were all ants, there was no difference. At this time, thousands of thoughts flashed through Yi Shiwen's mind, constantly combining into useful information. From Jun Dingtian's words, it wasn't difficult to determine that the death of the Lord of Darkness had a lot to do with him. However, why didn't he take away the Lord of Darkness's treasury after killing him? If he was really a deity, then it shouldn't be difficult. Then there was only one possibility left. He couldn't do it. What could make a deity unable to do it for countless years? The result was obvious. There was only one result that corresponded with his reincarnation, and that was that he also passed away. In that battle, both sides should have suffered great losses. The Lord of Darkness passed away, while Jun Dingtian was slightly better. He didn't die completely. His original spirit should have reincarnated. This was the only possibility that could explain the current situation. In the face of Jun Dingtian's aggressive attitude, he was very clear that Jun Dingtian wanted to completely destroy his mental defense in order to achieve the effect of subduing him without a fight. Whether or not we can achieve Tao validation can only be determined by time. However, even if you did, so what? Didn't you still die? What's the difference between you and us ants in your eyes? Yu Shiwen said with a sneer. You're just a loser. What qualifications do you have to be so noisy? Jun Dingtian's expression suddenly changed. From just now until now, he had been looking down on Ant. He didn't care about what the others said at all. However, Yi Shiwen's words had firmly poked his soft spot. Indeed, he used to be incomparably glorious. However, what was the use of that? That was many, many years ago. It wasn't the present anymore. So what if he achieved Tao validation? After countless years, he still died. What was the difference between him and those mortals who turned into a cup of soil? I think you're really tired of living. Jun Dingtian immediately stopped talking to Yi Shiwen. The long sword in his hand instantly pierced out. In the void, endless power swept in all directions. The sword aura tore the sky and went straight for Yi Shiwen's head. Chapter 1870. Jun Dingtian was completely infuriated by Yi Shiwen. He did not hold back at all. He wanted to eliminate Yi Shiwen in an instant. The sword essences surged and formed an overwhelming momentum, enveloping Yi Shiwen completely, not giving him any chance to breathe. Boom! Yi Shiwen raised his hand and stabbed with his sword. Boom! A loud roar swept across the area. Sword chi and golden sword will overflowed in the void. This was a terrifying power that was boiling. Yi Shiwen's long sword that was condensed from the golden divinity in his hand was destroyed in an instant. Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles were too overbearing. They contained almost all sword principles. Any kind of sword essences could be found in his 3,000 sword principles. As soon as he attacked, it was overwhelming. After he attacked with all his strength, Yi Shiwen realized that Jun Dingtian's skill was far above his. Although it was not as exaggerated as 3,000 times, it was far beyond Yi Shiwen's. He could not believe it at first. With the degree of his tyrant body, it could be said to be one of the most perfect bodies in the world. He would not lose to anyone in the same realm. However, he could not catch up with Jun Dingtian's skill. Jun Dingtian's long sword was only slightly offset by Yi Shiwen's attack, but it still went straight towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen took advantage of this slight opening. His body turned into a ball of golden light and dodged the attack. When he reappeared, he was already far away. His eyes were extremely cold. Jun Dingtian's strength was too strong. He was stronger than anyone he had fought before. There was a flash of wisdom in his eyes. The mysterious space in his body was constantly analyzing Jun Dingtian's situation. Yi Shiwen wanted to find the reason why Jun Dingtian was so overbearing. He did not believe that Jun Dingtian's physique cultivation technique was so much more overbearing than the tyrant body. How could it contain such a powerful skill? It was almost impossible for someone at the peak of the profound life realm to do so. There must be some special method. Jun Dingtian did not give him any chance to breathe. He attacked again with his sword. The 3,000 sword principles were like the sands of the Ganges River. They were dense and endless. They swept over in an instant. Endless sword chi surged out from his body. This won't do. I won't be able to analyze anything like this. I can only fight him with all my strength. Only then will I be able to discover the secret of his strength. Only then will I be able to improve further. Although Yi Shiwen was facing such a tyrannical attack, his eyes were extremely calm, without a trace of panic. It was as if everything in Jun Dingtian was within his calculations. At this moment, he was not like a human at all, but a huge computer, a supercomputer. His clothes were cut by the sword chi, and the sword will condensed from the sword in his hand swept in all directions. It was almost natural, and there were no flaws. In other words, the sword will that he had inherited from the king was not inferior to Jun Dingtian's sword will in essence. It was just that he had not perfected it yet. However, there was still a huge gap between their skills. Every stroke of Jun Dingtian's sword could kill an expert at the peak of the profound life realm. Even an ordinary expert at the peak of the profound life realm would not be able to react in time. Clang! Yi Shiwen barely managed to block Jun Dingtian's sword. The golden sword in his hand was completely shattered again. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Everyone's faces were gloomy. At this time, all of their hopes were on Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen couldn't defeat Jun Dingtian, they would probably be annihilated today. The reason why they didn't escape at this time was not because they trusted Yi Shiwen, but because they found that they had been firmly locked by Jun Dingtian's divine thoughts. They had absolute reason to believe that if they dared to escape, they would probably be killed by Jun Dingtian's sword. Jun Dingtian was only focusing on Yi Shiwen, but it did not mean that he did not have the strength to do so. They dared not take the risk. Therefore, at this time, they could only hope that Yi Shiwen could perform amazingly. However, after seeing Yi Shiwen being sent flying and killed by the sword, everyone's faces suddenly fell. Although they had already expected it, they still could not accept it when they saw it. Jun Dingtian had hidden his strength before, so they could not see anything. But now, with his full strength, Yi Shiwen, the peerless demon who had fought against two people at once, held back Zhan Ming and Chu Yun, and almost killed them, was actually no match for him. Their future was simply bleak, but now was not the time to completely lose hope, so they did not take any action yet. What should we do? How long can Yi Shiwen last? I have already sent out a distress signal, but even if they know the news, they can't rush over in such a short time. By the time they get here, our corpses will probably be cold for a long time. Although Yi Shiwen is amazing, he is just a mortal after all. How can he be compared with the reincarnation of a god? Yes, the reincarnation of such an ancient big shot has all kinds of innate advantages that ordinary people do not have. As long as they get their memories back, their martial arts experience will soon come in handy. For them, the obstacles of the realm do not exist at all. As long as they can quickly accumulate skills, their cultivation can advance by leaps and bounds in a short time. Yes, no wonder we have never heard of Jun Dingtian before. When we were paying attention to him previously, he had just stepped into the profound life realm. How long has it been, and he has actually stepped into the peak of the profound life realm. It's incredible. I have never seen such a terrifying cultivation speed. You overestimate yourself. Jun Dingtian sneered and blasted Yi Shiwen away with his sword. He felt like he had taken a deep breath and felt much better all of a sudden. The suffocating feeling of being stabbed in the ribs by Yi Shiwen just now was also much better. His next wave of attack had almost arrived in the blink of an eye, not giving Yi Shiwen any chance to breathe. In terms of martial arts experience, he was much more profound than Yi Shiwen. How could he make such a mistake and let the tiger return to the mountain? His sword momentum was getting more and more terrifying with each wave. The 3,000 sword principles were completely materialized, crushing everything in front of him. Just when his sword was about to slash Yi Shiwen in half, Yi Shiwen's body suddenly burst with the light of the power of life and death, which turned into a picture scroll to block in front of him. Clang! A loud roar sounded, and the sword intent slashed the yin-yang life and death pattern, directly causing violent fluctuations. Even the yin-yang life and death pattern faintly let out a mournful cry, as if it could feel how terrifying this sword was. No, if this goes on, even the yin-yang life and death pattern might not be able to hold on. Yi Shiwen's eyes were filled with horror. Jun Dingtian's attack was much more powerful than he had imagined, much more powerful than he had imagined. Yin-yang life and death pattern, isn't this the magic treasure of that old man? Why is it in your hands? Although it's incomplete, it's enough. As soon as Jun Dingtian saw the yin-yang life and death pattern, the distant memory that had been dormant in his mind suddenly awakened. He suddenly remembered the origin of the yin-yang life and death pattern, and his eyes suddenly lit up. The yin-yang life and death pattern was a well-known existence even among the divine tools. Even a top figure like Jun Dingtian had heard of it and coveted it. If it weren't for the fact that the owner of the yin-yang life and death pattern was so powerful, the yin-yang life and death pattern would have caused a war. Haha, the heavens are really helping me. It seems that the day of my rebirth is just around the corner. Jun Dingtian laughed to his heart's content. He was really lucky today. He didn't expect to get the flag of the Lord of Darkness and the yin-yang illustration of life and death. It seemed that there was always a way out. He had already proven his Tao, yet he had still died. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to him, who had his eyes on the top of his head. Every person who could prove their Tao was not only skilled in martial arts and had reached the acme of perfection. More importantly, every one of them had a long luck and could survive after experiencing all kinds of battles. However, once a god fell, it meant that their boundless luck had been used up, and it was extremely difficult to make a comeback. Although his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, as if he was sitting on a rocket, he actually didn't have much confidence that he could prove his Tao again. Luck was something that was hard to predict. If the heavens didn't give it to you, it would be useless no matter how hard you worked. Now that he was able to obtain 2 incomplete divine tools, it was enough to prove that the heavens still cared for him. How could he not be happy? Although he hadn't gotten his hands on the 2 incomplete divine tools, to him, they were already in the bag. The only difference was when he would get them. If you want to get them, exchange them with your life. Just when he was feeling proud, Yi Shiwen's cold voice suddenly appeared behind him. He didn't know when, but Yi Shiwen had already touched his back. A terrifying force swept out instantly. The sword intent traversed the sky and directly slammed down on Jun Dingtian's head. When did he get there? Everyone was extremely shocked because they didn't realize that Yi Shiwen's movements were so fast. It seemed like he was still far away a moment ago, but suddenly, he was behind Jun Dingtian. Was there still a possibility of a comeback? Chapter 1871. Hope was ignited in everyone's hearts. Yi Shiwen was their only hope at this moment. The consequences would be unimaginable if Yi Shiwen was defeated. While everyone was still in shock, the sword in Yi Shiwen's hand had already approached Jun Dingtian's head, as if it would blow him up in the next second. At this moment, Jun Dingtian suddenly turned his body with lightning speed. He waved his hand and a shocking sword light sprayed out, as if he was going to cut Yi Shiwen in half alive. It's useless. Do you think you can defeat me with such a sneak attack? A disdainful smile flashed across Jun Dingtian's mouth. He did not take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Absolute strength gave him absolute tyrannical means. He was not afraid of Yi Shiwen's tricks at all. It was just like how Sun Wukong could never get out of Buddha's 5-finger mountain. Clang! 2 huge sword lights fiercely slashed together in the void. Unsurprisingly, Jun Dingtian's sword intention directly obliterated Yi Shiwen's sword intention. Then, it continued to sweep across, as if it was going to cut Yi Shiwen in half in an instant. However, at this moment, Yi Shiwen seemed to be prepared for it. He directly turned into a ball of golden light, causing the sword to slash the air. In the distance, Yi Shiwen's figure appeared with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He had forcibly suppressed his injury in exchange for this opportunity to attack. However, it was useless. As he had expected, Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond his. Such a small trick would not work. Just like when Zhan Ming and Chu Yun teamed up to deal with him, it was useless. They were no match for him at all. Even when the 2 of them teamed up, it was useless. This was the crushing of absolute strength. Even so, he did not stop. He took a step forward and disappeared in midair. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Jun Dingtian. The tip of his sword directly slashed at Jun Dingtian from a tricky angle. Clang! A loud sound of metal colliding directly announced that Yi Shiwen's sneak attack this time was useless. However, it seemed as if Yi Shiwen would never get tired. The moment this wave of offensive had just stopped, the next wave of offensive had already pounced on him to kill. Clang! 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 The silhouettes of both sides were constantly emitting astonishing collision sounds in the void. Yi Shiwen was constantly blasted out, but every time he was blasted out, he would stubbornly climb back up and relaunch his charge. In the eyes of the crowd, he was like Don Quixote, already stupid. This Yi Shiwen is crazy. It's obviously useless. Why is he still launching attacks? Some people were puzzled. They could see that Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond Yi Shiwen's. In other words, no matter how many times Yi Shiwen attacked, he wouldn't be able to pose any threat to him. But he still did it. What was the reason? Many people didn't understand. Is he crazy? It's impossible for him to find Jun Dingtian's flaw. Jun Dingtian might have a flaw, but Yi Shiwen can't find it. Many people present had the same opinion. They were all experts with rich experience, so they could see it clearly. No, it's the opposite. It's precisely because he's not Jun Dingtian's opponent that he has to take the initiative. He's already not Jun Dingtian's opponent. If he can't take the initiative, even the rhythm of the battle will fall into Jun Dingtian's control. That's really hopeless, Qin Lai said with a frown. At this time, he had already taken advantage of the battle between Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian to recuperate. Although he couldn't leave, it didn't prevent him from analyzing the battle between the two. In all fairness, both of them were called the heroes of their generation. Either one of them was far above him. If he were to fight with Yi Shiwen now, the outcome would probably be similar to the current battle between Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian. It was a pity that there was a saying, since there's a Yu, there's also a Liang. Since there's Yi Shiwen, there's also an even more monstrous existence like Jun Dingtian. After knowing that Jun Dingtian was the reincarnation of a god, his heart suddenly felt balanced. Although he might not be very old, the reincarnation of a god couldn't be calculated with normal logic. When he recovered his memories and martial arts experience, he would be equivalent to a genius who had cultivated for countless years. How could ordinary people be his opponent? This was also a matter of course, not to mention that Jun Dingtian was once a god. However, he could still see that Yi Shiwen's imposing aura was gradually weakening. Every time he was sent flying, his injuries would worsen, his imposing aura would weaken, and his movements would gradually slow down. How could he not see it? Yi Shiwen took the initiative to attack, and indeed seized the initiative of the battle. However, Huang Fang's strength was too far apart. Yi Shiwen's defeat was only a matter of time. It was nothing more than delaying this time to a later period of time. Jun Dingtian, who was in the middle of the battlefield, was even more surprised. As the saying goes, the onlookers see the game more clearly. In fact, at this time, there was no one who knew the current situation better than him. He had never been lenient in his attacks. Although the rhythm of the battle was controlled by Yi Shiwen, in fact, if one didn't have enough tyrannical strength, controlling the rhythm of the battle would become a joke. It was simply impossible. If it were an ordinary profound life realm, it would be useless to imitate Yi Shiwen's tactic. He would be directly pierced by his sword and killed directly. There was no other outcome. Yi Shiwen's tenacity had already exceeded his imagination to be able to persist until now with injuries. Whether it was physical strength, speed, or understanding of martial arts, Yi Shiwen could be said to be the best among his peers. If he hadn't met Jun Dingtian, it was indeed possible for him to prove his Tao. However, this was only a possibility. There were many corpses on the road to prove his Tao. It was enough to have Jun Dingtian alone. Thinking of this, he was no longer anxious. How could he not see what Qin Lai could see? Yi Shiwen was just a cornered beast fighting, and it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. As he thought of this, his movements were not the slightest bit slow. All kinds of amazing moves, sword essences, and sword techniques that had never been seen or heard of were directly displayed. It was like mercury spilling on the ground, pouring out in torrents, and splitting the vast sky. The battle between the two completely shattered the void. Both sides had gone crazy, especially Yi Shiwen, who didn't hold back at all. The tyrannical strength of his tyrant body was also reflected incisively and vividly at this time. He was like a crazy demon, constantly attacking, seizing the initiative of the battle, and delaying the time of his defeat. As the others had guessed, Yi Shiwen was indeed delaying time. However, it wasn't because he was delaying time for defeat, but because he was analyzing the reason why Jun Dingtian was so tyrannical. He seemed to be a crazy demon, attacking Jun Dingtian without a moment's pause. He was blasted away, rushed up again, and was blasted away again. He kept repeating this process for who knew how many times. Both sides were left in the void, and many people couldn't see clearly anymore. The tempest wings behind him were also unreservedly displayed. Without the tempest wings, it would be impossible for him to keep up with the speed of Jun Dingtian's swordsmanship. However, if anyone could see his eyes, they would find that they were extremely calm. Jun Dingtian was extremely calm, because he was sure that he would win, while Yi Shiwen's heart was as still as water, unaffected by everything, without the slightest fluctuation. He was like an emotionless robot, constantly calculating. Time. Yi Shiwen shouted in his heart. He needed time now. Through the crazy collisions with Jun Dingtian, he seemed to have finally grasped the mystery of Jun Dingtian's strength. It was just like following the vines to the melon. He wanted to find out the mystery, and the mystery that would make his strength to the next level. However, time waited for no man. His physical condition was getting worse. Although he was extremely calm, like a robot, he was very clear about his own physical condition. Even with the tyrannical tyrant body, he was not far from collapsing. He needed time. Unfortunately, when he needed time, time waited for no one. Yi Shiwen's injuries were constantly worsening. Although he was forcibly suppressing his injuries and fighting with Jun Dingtian, it couldn't delay the injuries of his body. This was under the condition that he had the Phoenix regeneration technique to heal himself. Without the Phoenix regeneration technique, even with the tyrant body, he would have collapsed long ago. Time passed minute by minute. Everyone's heart gradually sank. Yi Shiwen's whole body seemed to be soaked in blood. Blood was gushing out from every pore of his body. This was a sign that his internal organs had been shaken. His whole body looked like a bloody man, and his movements were getting slower and slower. It seemed like he had really reached his limit, completely at his limit, and was about to collapse. I finally figured it out. Yi Shiwen let out a loud shout, and his entire body was sent flying. But this time, he simply couldn't get up. He fell heavily on the ground, and directly created a big pit. He was even more miserable than Qin Lai. Is everything going to end? Everyone thought unwillingly. This was not only Yi Shiwen's failure, but also the death of all of them. At this time, only Yi Shiwen was still persevering. The real elemental energy in his body was constantly circulating, trying to break through, trying to make himself stronger. Although I don't know what you've figured out, it's useless. Go to hell. Jun Dingtian directly sprinkled out a shocking sword light, and slashed at Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1872. The sword radiance tore a crack in the sky and went straight for Yi Shiwen's head. Boom! A thunderous roar was heard. The terrifying sword radiance was caught by a giant demonic hand. This demonized big hand was directly pierced by this terrifying swordlight, but it stopped 3 inches in front of Yi Shiwen's forehead. Who is it? Jun Dingtian's face turned cold as he looked into the void. In the void, a monstrous demonic aura gushed out and swept in all directions. It was extremely terrifying. Vaguely, a figure could be seen standing in the midst of this monstrous demonic aura. What kind of demon is this? How dare you be so insolent in front of me? Jun Dingtian was disdainful. He immediately raised his sword and went straight to the sky. He did not continue to chase after Yi Shiwen. Instead, he wanted to get rid of the figure in the demonic aura first. Clang! A huge explosion sounded. The sword radiance was blocked. Endless demonic aura devoured everything, including the sword radiance. In the void, there was a huge wheel that was spinning faintly in the void, blocking everything, all the surprise attacks, playing tricks. Jun Dingtian snorted coldly and began to get serious. He took a step forward and the sword radiance flowed out like mercury. It swept everything and directly broke into the mass of demonic aura. Boom! There was a shocking explosion. A huge mushroom cloud slowly rose from the ground. The endless demonic aura was blown away. At this time, everyone could finally see clearly that there was a woman in the center of the demonic aura. She was dressed in a palace dress and her face was as cold as frost. Some people recognized her on the spot. Isn't this Princess Tianqing of the country of darkness? How is this possible? That's Princess Tianqing. How can she be so powerful? Everyone shuddered. They could all feel that the aura of Princess Tianqing was extremely strong. It was even more tyrannical than some of the experts at the peak of the profound life realm that they had seen. How was this possible? Many of them had seen Princess Tianqing before. However, none of them could see that she had hidden such a deep level of strength. It was incredible. With such strength, even among the younger generation of the entire Xian world, he was an outstanding figure. How could they not have seen such a figure before? Too strong. This kind of strength is even stronger than Zhan Ming. Someone couldn't help but murmur. It was especially so for the princes of the Dark Nation. At this moment, their faces suddenly turned pale. If they could still compete with each other before, then after Princess Tianqing successfully stepped into the peak profound life realm, the gap in strength between them had become so huge that there was almost no suspense for the throne of the Dark Nation. Even without the divine weapon, the throne would not be able to escape Princess Tianqing's grasp. At this time, their faces were filled with incomparable unwillingness. They had been fighting against each other for so many years, but in the end, Princess Tianqing had taken advantage of them. Countless years of hard work had actually become a wedding dress for someone else. This kind of feeling made them want to die. That's impossible. Hasn't her strength always been at the king rank? Everyone was in disbelief. Among them, Yi Shiwen was the most incredulous, because when everyone thought that she had hidden her strength, only Yi Shiwen knew that she had not hidden her strength, because she had even stepped into the profound life realm not long ago. She had seen it with her own eyes not long ago. It was not like others thought that she had hidden her strength. Up until now, she had only just stepped into the profound life stage. Just what kind of fortuitous encounter did she have during the period of time that he had been gone? She had actually managed to leap 3 levels in cultivation, allowing her to step into the peak of the profound life stage in one go. This was simply inconceivable. He looked carefully. At this moment, Princess Tianqing's face was ashen, as if she was enduring some kind of powerful pressure. It was very likely that she had received some kind of power transfer. Only in this way could she possibly step into the peak profound life realm in one fell swoop. Even now, she had not digested all the power in her body, which caused the demonic aura to fill the sky. But even so, Princess Tianqing had already stepped into the peak profound life realm in such a short period of time. It was shocking enough. No wonder she was so confident that she could ascend to the throne without relying on the divine weapon. With her strength in the peak profound life realm, she indeed did not need to rely on the divine weapon to be able to dominate the country of darkness. Humph! Jun Dingtian could immediately tell that Princess Tianqing had received some kind of inheritance, but it was obvious that she had not digested all the power. Otherwise, she would not be in such a state. But to him, it made no difference. The 3,000 sword principles were instantly launched again, turning into countless sword lights. Like a meteor streaking across the sky, they directly went towards Princess Tianqing. No matter what kind of inheritance she had inherited, since she dared to stand in his way, there was only one outcome for her: death. Facing the meteor-like sword lights, Princess Tianqing's face was cold. She directly punched out, and the fist intent in the void turned into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation. The huge 6 paths of reincarnation emitted a terrifying light and clashed with the sword intent in the sky. Tit for tat, Princess Tianqing had no intention of retreating. Boom! 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 The battle between the two was like brilliant fireworks in the void, constantly tearing the sky apart and falling into the chaos. The 6 paths of reincarnation were constantly being torn apart by the sword lights, but they were constantly being repaired by her. Princess Tianqing kept retreating under Jun Dingtian's strong attack. Obviously, even at this time, the inheritance she had obtained from an unknown place was not as domineering as Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist is indeed amazing. Back then, the Azura Demon King relied on it to dominate the world. But it's a pity that your skills are far from perfect, just like the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist. Jun Dingtian praised the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, but he was dismissive of Princess Tianqing. At the side, Qin Lai's face showed a mixture of shame and anger. His defeat was equivalent to losing the face of 2 great emperors, and he could not forgive himself, even if the opponent was a reincarnation of a god, such a heaven-defying monster. You'll know whether I've reached home or not if you try. Princess Tianqing did not have the slightest bit of cowardice in the situation where she was constantly at a disadvantage. She kept blasting out the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Her body constantly spewed out the purest devil chi, constantly supporting her body. Originally, a cultivation method like the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was very strenuous even for her, but now it was as if it was free. She kept blasting it out. Boom! 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 As time went by, even Jun Dingtian's face showed signs of anxiety and impatience. Although he kept beating Princess Tianqing, her skills were too strong, and he could not hurt her for a while. It should be said that it was difficult to hurt her before her skills were exhausted. Although he was confident that he would be the final winner, he did not have that much time. When the experts of the major forces arrived, he would definitely be the one being hunted down. After all, there was the profound death realm above the profound life realm. But at this time, Princess Tianqing was not having a good time either. She was forcibly digesting the monstrous skills, and at this time, she still had to fight with Jun Dingtian. It was killing her. Had it not been for the fact that she had been preparing for this moment all these years, she would have already collapsed. However, she still gritted her teeth and held on. She glanced at Yi Shiwen, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. At this time, she could only count on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't abandon her and leave alone in the past. First, there was Yi Shiwen, and then there was Princess Tianqing. There are so many geniuses in this world. But it is precisely because of this that we have hope. Although the 3,000 sword principles is powerful, Jun Dingtian can't keep using it. No one can bear such amazing combat power at this time. There must be some time limit. If this continues, we may still have hope. Someone said, and it immediately resonated with everyone. Thinking about it, it was really possible, but they did not think in this direction at all. Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing might have persisted for so long, but if it were them, they might not even be able to withstand a single move, and would have been completely killed. At this time, everyone's eyes turned to Yi Shiwen, who was sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. At this time, would he have enough time to recover? Everyone knew that he was injured just now, and his life was hanging by a thread. In such a short period of time, to what extent could he recover was still a problem. At this time, Yi Shiwen, who was expected by everyone, was constantly adjusting his breath. The breath on his body fluctuated between strong and weak, as if he was constantly transforming, but also as if he would stop breathing at any time. Everyone was afraid that he would not be able to hold on and stop breathing. The faint cry of a phoenix could be heard coming from his body. He didn't look well on the surface. However, he was actually full of vitality inside. Everyone had thought that he had gone crazy, but he had been constantly comprehending the Tao principles. Everyone had underestimated his phoenix regeneration technique. Princess Tianqing had bought enough time for him. Although his breath seemed unstable on the surface, in fact, he had already recovered to 70% to 80%. What really troubled him was how to become more powerful. Recovering to 70% to 80% was meaningless, and he was still not a match for Jun Dingtian. He had already fallen into deep thought. Chapter 1873. When he was fighting with Jun Dingtian, he attacked crazily, forcing Jun Dingtian to use all his strength. Although he was seriously injured, it was not without result. On the contrary, he saw a lot of things and deduced a lot of things from the fight between the two of them. Countless possibilities flashed in his mind, and he eliminated the wrong ones one by one. At the same time, his divine thoughts did not let go of the two people fighting in the void. He continued to observe and confirm his previous guess. After a long time, he finally came to a conclusion. Sure enough, as he had guessed, the reason why Jun Dingtian was so powerful was not because his strength was much stronger than Yi Shiwen, but because he integrated the extra strength into his swordsmanship. It could even be said that his 3,000 swordsmanship were all peerless swordsmen. His strength was usually scattered among the 3,000 swordsmanship, and when it was concentrated at a critical moment, it was the guarantee of monstrous strength. This was a direction that he had never thought about, but Jun Dingtian had opened a new door for him. He dispersed his strength into martial arts and formed something like an external incarnation, which was very powerful. Once used, all these martial arts incarnations could be concentrated, and their strength would skyrocket countless times in an instant, enough to crush any enemy. This was originally just his guess, but after a period of time, he finally confirmed his guess. At this time, Yi Mo was not here, so there was no way to ask the experienced old devil. However, he was confident that he was close to the truth, and that was about it. Although this was what he said, it was extremely difficult to actually do it. Even before Jun Dingtian, he had never heard of it, let alone doing it. He deduced it himself, and it was very difficult to actually complete it, but it gave him a new direction to move forward. Once he mastered it, he would be able to be like Jun Dingtian, dominating the same realm. Yi Shiwen named this method as martial arts doppelganger. Although the time was still short, and he had no way to condense a martial arts doppelganger, but just by comprehending this, he felt that his realm had advanced by leaps and bounds. Some of the things that he didn't understand before had instantly become clear thanks to this breakthrough. In other words, in this short time, he felt that his strength had increased to another level. Although it was still not comparable to Jun Dingtian, who used 3,000 swordsmanship, it was already monstrous and abnormal. After deducing the cause and effect, Yi Shiwen also knew the advantages and disadvantages of martial arts incarnation like the back of his hand. Although the martial arts doppelganger was extremely tyrannical, and once used, it was invincible, but it also had a huge flaw, and that was that it could not be used for a long time, because to use so many martial arts at the same time, it required a huge amount of power to support it. Jun Dingtian could not fight like this forever, and as long as he could drag the time, he was confident that he could defeat Jun Dingtian. After all, although Jun Dingtian was tyrannical before, it was still within the scope of Yi Shiwen's ability to deal with. What was really tyrannical was when he used martial arts incarnation, which instantly increased his strength by several times. It was terrifying. It was a secret technique that could make a person who was already at the peak of the profound life realm increase his strength by several times in one go. Such a secret technique was rare in the world. It was a bit similar to the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist, but the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist was more brilliant, and it secretly catered to the way of heaven and earth. Just using the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist alone had great power, and could increase one's strength by several times in one go. After having a direction, he suddenly felt that June Dingtian was not so scary. All cowardice came from ignorance, and once he knew, there was nothing to be afraid of. After sorting out these things, Yi Shiwen felt that there was only light in front of him, and his state of mind had improved by leaps and bounds. It was a kind of relief and carefree feeling after defeating a strong enemy. Just when everyone's eyes were focused on Princess Tianqing and June Dingtian, they heard a shrill piercing sound, and the void was torn in half on the spot. Then, a huge axe came out of it, raised high and directly chopped down towards Yi Shiwen. Everything happened too fast, and by the time everyone realized it, the axe was already not far from Yi Shiwen's forehead. No one could react to the sudden change, and they did not expect that someone would attack Yi Shiwen at this time. Zhan Ming, it's Zhan Ming. Qin Lai immediately reacted. He was all too familiar with that axe. In fact, in the Xian World battlefield, he and Zhan Ming had fought more than once, and he was also very familiar with his heaven-splitting axe. In all fairness, Zhan Ming was indeed a very strong opponent. Even now, when he heard that he and Chu Yun had joined forces, but still lost to Yi Shiwen, he did not change his opinion. But at this time, he never expected that the one who suddenly attacked was Zhan Ming, who he thought had escaped. Ha ha ha, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Yi Shiwen. Even the heavens want to destroy you and cut off your luck. An extremely arrogant roar came from behind the crack, and it was Zhan Ming himself. Just when everyone thought that he had escaped, no one expected him to come back, and he came back quietly. He had been lurking at the side, waiting for such an opportunity. He had already shed all pretense of cordiality with Yi Shiwen, and how could he not understand the principle of cutting weeds at the roots? He was also very clear that if there was a chance, next time, Yi Shiwen would definitely kill him with his own hands, without the slightest bit of mercy. He could already feel the terrifying threat of Yi Shiwen, so he only had one choice, and that was to take the initiative to gain the upper hand. Only by killing Yi Shiwen first could he avoid the fate of being killed. Originally, he just wanted to see what kind of opportunity there was, but who would have thought that there would always be a way out? Just when he was about to leave, who knew that Yi Shiwen would actually fight with June Dingtian, and most importantly, he was seriously injured by June Dingtian. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to eradicate this big trouble in one fell swoop. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that Yi Shiwen was doomed, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and an amazing divine light shot out from his eyes, and hit the axe directly. In an instant the axe was blasted away, and then continuously danced in the sky, and finally directly hit the roof of the main hall, and directly inserted into the group. And near the crack, everyone could see a pair of big bloody hands trembling. In an instant, Zhan Ming felt that the force of 1,000 pounds had hit his hands, and directly ruptured the web between his thumb and index finger, making him unable to hold it, and the axe directly flew out. How is this possible? Behind the crack, Zhan Ming still couldn't believe it at all. So scary, Yi Shiwen was even more terrifying than he had imagined, and 100 times, 1,000 times more terrifying. Isn't he already injured? How can he still be so strong? Could it be that he wasn't injured at all, and was purely trying to confuse me so that I would attack? At this time, Zhan Ming's mind was a bit chaotic, and he couldn't believe it. Countless conspiracy possibilities flashed in his mind in an instant, and this was the only way to explain everything in front of him. In his lifetime, he would never know how terrifying Yi Shiwen's recovery ability was. When Zhan Ming fought with him, he didn't really force Yi Shiwen to use his true strength, let alone know about his recovery ability, because it was simply not to that extent. However, no matter how many thoughts flashed in his mind, his reaction was not slow. When he knew that his killing move had failed, he almost didn't stop, and directly turned around to escape on the spot, almost without any hesitation. Where do you think you're going? How could Yi Shiwen allow Zhan Ming to escape at this time? He shouted in a cold voice, and a big hand directly grabbed towards the void. The void instantly collapsed, and revealed Zhan Ming, who was in the subspace. So, Zhan Ming simply couldn't escape. His big hand was like a huge prison, and it fell across the sky. This was one of the moves of his sky-severing finger, imprisoning the heavens. At this time, he used it in the form of a palm technique, and its power was a notch higher. For the current Yi Shiwen, he had already mastered all kinds of martial arts. In addition, when he had experienced the Ghost Heart Fire Great Array and the martial arts Doppelganger, he had made a huge breakthrough in his realm. This had greatly improved his understanding of these martial arts. He had directly disregarded the situation and digested the essence. Zhan Ming only felt that the surrounding space was instantly sealed, as if even the sky could be imprisoned, let alone a mere mortal like him. Bang! He was directly grabbed by Yi Shiwen on the spot, and he constantly struggled, trying to break free from Yi Shiwen's grasp. His body continuously burst forth with astonishing axe radiance, and waves of axe radiance swept out from his body, forming a violent storm, destroying everything in its path. Yi Shiwen only sneered. If it was in the past, perhaps this move of Zhan Ming's might have some effect on him, but now he had a completely new understanding of martial arts. Although he had not broken through to the profound death realm, his combat power had greatly increased compared to before. At this time, in his eyes, Zhan Ming was just like a clown, and could not create any waves at all. Boom! After struggling to break free, Zhan Ming despaired, and a ruthless look appeared in his eyes. He actually wanted to self-destruct, and perish together with Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen did not give him this opportunity. If an expert at the peak of the profound life realm self-destructed, even he would be affected. Therefore, he simply took the initiative and crushed Zhan Ming first. Chapter 1874. Everything had happened too fast. From Zhan Ming's sudden attack to Yi Shiwen's counterattack, it had happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone hadn't recovered from the shock of Zhan Ming's sudden attack, but they had already seen Yi Shiwen crush him. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but take a deep breath. They could not help but feel a chill down their spine. This was too unreal. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that the person who was crushed in an instant was actually Zhan Ming. Yi Shiwen's fighting prowess had already reached such a high level? With Zhan Ming's strength, it was enough to sweep away an ordinary expert at the initial mastery of the profound life realm. He had even faintly touched the profound death realm. However, he could not even last one move against Yi Shiwen. They were in the same realm, but the gap in strength was actually so big? Was this still the profound life realm? Even an expert at the profound death realm could not be compared to this. Although Yi Shiwen's current strength could not be compared to the profound death realm, in the eyes of the crowd, there was no difference between him and the profound death realm. They were both killed in one move. There was not much difference. Yi Shiwen was already so terrifying. How strong was Jun Dingtian, who had used the 3,000 sword principles? Originally, the crowd did not seem to have a clear understanding. Now, it seemed that Jun Dingtian, who had reached such a level, was no longer a match. Have they actually become so strong? Qin Lai looked at the few people with a somewhat complicated gaze. He originally thought that he was strong enough, but now it seemed that he was still far from it. Looks like it's time to make a trip back to the Heaven Realm. Yi Shiwen is already so strong, I can't fall behind. Sooner or later, I will return, and we will have a chance to fight again. Qin Lai looked at Yi Shiwen and the others with incomparable determination. Thinking of this, his mood suddenly became a lot more relaxed. Yi Shiwen slowly stood up. Since he had already made his move, there was no need to continue waiting. He had already determined that Jun Dingtian would not be able to last long with the 3,000 sword principles. He wanted to see how long Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles could last. Boom! The aura on his body swept out in circles and instantly swept out, forming a huge storm. He also attacked without holding anything back. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's figure disappeared in an instant. He left several light spots in the void and disappeared. Jun Dingtian immediately became vigilant. Yi Shiwen was not like those ordinary experts at the peak of the profound life realm. Whether he admitted it or not, he had to take such a tenacious opponent seriously. But at this time, he was being entangled by Princess Tianqing. Although the demonic aura on her body had been greatly depleted and she had become much more stable, it couldn't be said that her attacks were completely powerless. Even with the 3,000 sword Daos, he could still feel the pressure from her 6 paths of reincarnation fists. Jun Dingtian, I've seen through you. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind him, followed by a loud and piercing sound. A long sword swept over and was about to behead him. His movements were smooth and extremely fast. Many people didn't even have time to react. Whoosh! 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 The 3,000 sword Daos in Jun Dingtian's body were instantly resurrected and automatically protected him. Yi Shiwen's long sword slashed directly on the sword Daos, but it couldn't go any further. At this moment, Jun Dingtian's attack was like a tidal wave, rushing towards Yi Shiwen. It was extremely sharp and fast. His swordsmanship was manifested, condensing into countless sword lights in the void, like meteors falling to the ground, directly blasting towards Yi Shiwen. Dang dang dang! Yi Shiwen retreated continuously, constantly stepping on light spots. His figure was constantly flickering, avoiding the sharp attack. See through me? You're just a mortal! Jun Dingtian sneered, not taking Yi Shiwen's words seriously. Although Yi Shiwen was difficult to deal with, he was just an ant that was difficult to deal with. He could be trampled to death. I'm just a mortal! Yi Shiwen laughed out loud, and the tempest wings behind him spread open again, directly fanning a huge whirlwind, and his figure directly disappeared in this endless tempest and thunderstorm. Don't forget, you're just a mortal now. Yi Shiwen's figure appeared behind him again, directly striking a wave of attacks like quicksilver, directly blocked by Jun Dingtian. Even in the face of Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing's sudden attack, he was still able to firmly defend his territory. In fact, not even a drop of water could enter his territory. In fact, martial arts had become an art in his hands. His sword heart had already reached the divine level. Humph! Jun Dingtian snorted coldly. Countless rays of sword radiance rose around him like a tsunami, sweeping in all directions, tearing apart the space nearby. This move covered a large area. No matter where Yi Shiwen hid, even if he hid in the subspace, it would be useless. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen was forced to show his figure, a little embarrassed, but he didn't look the slightest bit depressed. On the contrary, he laughed loudly. I've seen through your 3,000 sword Daos, Yi Shiwen said. With such a huge consumption, you must be at your limit. Let's see how long you can hold on. Jun Dingtian was shocked. He didn't expect Yi Shiwen to see through it. His 3,000 swords doctrine was so powerful that it had boosted his martial power by several times. However, such a powerful technique was not without its shortcomings. The shortcoming was that it consumed too much energy. Even a reincarnated deity like him, who had an incomparably powerful physique refining technique, couldn't support the consumption of his martial power for too long. This could be considered a weakness, and a very big one at that. It was just that he had long forgotten about it after his reincarnation. That was because all the opponents he had encountered since his reincarnation, no matter what kind of geniuses the outside world evaluated them to be, they were all fleeting clouds in front of him. Once he used the 3,000 sword principles, those geniuses were all slaughtered as if they were melons and vegetables. There had never been anyone who could force him to this extent. Even Yi Shiwen was no exception. If it wasn't for Princess Tianqing, even he would have died on the spot. Now, this wasn't a weakness, but Yi Shiwen had suddenly grasped it. Unlike the others, who were just guessing, he was keenly aware of the weakness of his 3,000 sword Daos. At this time, it was likely to develop into a fatal flaw. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. Could it be that he was going to lose for the first time in history? Let's see if you can hold on until then. Jun Dingtian shouted coldly and took the initiative to attack. His figure directly pulled out a sky full of afterimages, tearing the sound barrier and bursting out with a very sharp piercing sound. He arrived in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. This wasn't a spatial shuttle. Instead, he had achieved this by relying on his speed. His agility technique was tyrannical, and his martial power was incomparably high. At this time, it was completely reflected. He spread out his big hand, and an incomparably huge long sword condensed in the void. It rotated unceasingly, and issued a crisp and melodious metallic clanging sound. Then, it directly pierced towards Yi Shiwen's head. Dang! At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen's wind and thunder wings directly protected his whole body. His whole body was also hit by a huge force, directly smashing into the ground. Puff! He directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Although his strength had increased a lot, there wasn't much of a difference when facing Jun Dingtian, whose strength had increased by several times. Jun Dingtian immediately grabbed the sword and threw it at Yi Shiwen with all his might. Swoosh! The long sword was fast and urgent, cutting through the vast sky. Everywhere it passed, everything collapsed, and heaven and earth ceased to exist. It seemed like it was going to nail Yi Shiwen to the ground on the spot. Princess Tianqing looked on from the side, suppressing the boiling demonic energy in her body, and attacked again. She blasted out a punch, and the fist intent turned into an incomparably huge wheel, directly crushing towards Jun Dingtian. Heaven Dao, Human Dao, Azura Dao, Animal Dao, Hungry Ghost Dao, Hell Dao. 6 paths of reincarnation, each path had the power to destroy heaven and earth, and purify all living beings. It was extremely terrifying. Jun Dingtian didn't dare to take it lightly, and directly blasted back with his sword. At this time, when the sword was about to hit Yi Shiwen, he managed to dodge it at the critical moment. He managed to avoid getting hit in his vital parts, but even so, half of his body was still blasted into smithereens. He almost died. The battle had reached the most intense stage, and both sides were engaged in a life-and-death battle. No one dared to hold back, even Jun Dingtian, who had the upper hand, was no exception. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that Jun Dingtian would continue to attack, Jun Dingtian, who was originally full of momentum, suddenly trembled slightly. The 3,000 sword principles that had swept out in the sky were like the ebbing tide of the sea, pouring into his body. His aura instantly fell completely. Although it was still very powerful, it was no longer the same as before. Everyone immediately reacted. Could it be, as Yi Shiwen said, that Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles had really reached the peak? Cough, cough. Yi Shiwen kept coughing out blood, and kept running the Phoenix regeneration technique to repair the half of his body that had been smashed. A victorious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, the biggest weakness of the 3,000 sword principles was time. This wasn't really a weakness, but it still allowed him to persist until now. Chapter 1875. Jun Dingtian's body froze in midair. His 3,000 swords principles secret technique had finally reached its end, and he had exhausted all of his accumulated power. At this moment, his combat power could be said to have fallen to the bottom. Although it was not that he had no combat power left, in fact, he was even stronger than Princess Tianqing. However, it was quite impossible for him to kill both of them. He did not expect that things would end up like this. It could be said that accidents happened frequently. At this time, He still looked at the flag that was filled with demonic qi, unwilling to give up. However, he was also very clear that Princess Tianqing would not give him the chance to do so. The half of Yi Shiwen's body that had been smashed was also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed that it would not take long for him to return to his peak. When that time came, even he did not have the confidence to fight 2 against 1. However, if he were to give up like this, not only would he not get the flag, but he would also not be able to kill Yi Shiwen. How could he be willing to give up like this? At this moment, Jun Dingtian was in a dilemma. He couldn't move forward, but he couldn't retreat either. However, his dilemma only lasted for a few breaths of time. After all, he was a man of great talent and bold vision. He knew when to make a decision. If he did not make a prompt decision, it was very likely that he would lose his life here. Just like how he had to kill Yi Shiwen to prevent future troubles, Yi Shiwen would not let him go. If there was a chance, he would suddenly kill him and kill him. The situation of mutual appreciation did not occur between the two of them. They only fought each other with blood. There was no personal grudge, only survival and only Tao. These 2 reasons were enough. He didn't expect that he would be forced to this point. More importantly, he had revealed that he was the reincarnation of God. This news would quickly spread from the mouths of the survivors to the ears of those who were interested. If he wanted to be free and unfettered in the future, it wouldn't be so easy. When that time came, there would be a lot of people who would come to find trouble with him. However, it was useless to think about this at this time. It was not that he did not have a trump card. As the reincarnation of a god, his strength was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Even the endless resources he had were far from what people thought. Swoosh! His entire figure directly turned into a stream of light, tearing the sky apart and directly disappeared in the air. Boom! At this moment, the crowd suddenly became excited. Everyone's emotions were like riding a roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down. They originally thought that they were doomed, but they did not expect that there would be a day where they could escape from Jun Dingtian. It was simply incredible. Everyone had already listed Jun Dingtian as one of the people that they could not afford to offend. Most of the people present were experts at the profound life realm. Even they felt the same way. One could imagine how much shock Jun Dingtian had given them this time. It was far beyond their imagination. Everyone finally understood. Through the battle between Yi Shiwen and the battle, Jun Realm, Jun Dingtian and God, Jun Sky, Dingtian, Jun Yi, Jun's Jun, and Dingtian Jun. In peak, they peak Thousand Realm, Jun, the God, Jun, and the old Jun, he, Realm, Jun God the Realm. In any case, it was true that she was at the peak of the profound life realm at such a young age. It was not easy for Yi Shiwen to finally recover to his peak state. However, today's battle with Jun Dingtian had damaged his vitality. He was crippled twice, and the impact was not that simple to forget. However, the harvest from this battle was also quite rich for him. In particular, it pointed out a new path for him, which suddenly broadened his future. In general, the harvest was still greater than the loss, and by a lot. After he recovered to his peak, he immediately grabbed the flag that was full of devil chi with one hand. At this time, the princes of the Dark Country had a somewhat painful expression on their faces. This flag was the national treasure of their Dark Country. Yi Shiwen, this is the national treasure of our Dark Country. It's called the Demon Summoning Flag. According to the hints left by our ancestors, this demon summoning flag should be a divine tool left by the Dark Lord. However, it was damaged in that battle. If it is properly refined, it will still have a lot of power. At this time, Princess Tianqing's voice came into Yi Shiwen's ears. Princess Tianqing's voice was a bit depressed, as if she was suppressing some kind of extreme pain. The tacit understanding that gushed out of her body was endless, and there was still no way to completely digest it. The name Demon Summoning Banner didn't sound extraordinary, but it was refined by the Lord of Darkness as a natal magic tool. Most importantly, compared to the severely damaged Tianyuan mirror, the damage it suffered was much lighter, and it was easier to refine it again. Boom! As soon as Yi Shiwen's big hand patted the flag, the demon summoning flag suddenly erupted with a shocking demon energy. The demon energy was like the sharpest weapon, directly cutting the sky, and directly shattering Yi Shiwen's big hand. The power was quite amazing, and it could be seen how powerful the demon summoning flag was in its best state. However, it was already damaged at this time, not to mention that it didn't have a master to control it. Although it wanted to escape, how could it escape from Yi Shiwen's grasp? Shwa! Yi Shiwen's body directly brushed out a bloody light, and the demon summoning flag immediately surrendered as if it had encountered a monarch. Yi Shiwen finally breathed a sigh of relief. If this demon summoning flag continued to resist stubbornly, then it wouldn't be easy for him to subdue it, not to mention that there were so many people in the surroundings who were eyeing it covetously. Finally, by relying on the coercion of Tianyuan mirror, the demon summoning flag was finally suppressed. Although the demon summoning flag was extraordinary, it couldn't be compared with Tianyuan mirror, the former demon monarch's divine tool. After subduing the demon summoning flag, Yi Shiwen immediately bid farewell to Qin Lai and the others, and then headed towards the direction of the Ghost Heart Fire Array with Princess Tianqing. He was still quite worried at this time, and he didn't know which step Yemo had progressed to. Although the ancient god scripture was helping to suppress the demon summoning flag, the spiritual wisdom wouldn't be easy to deal with. Otherwise, Yemo wouldn't have been forced to such a state. Everyone saw Yi Shiwen leaving, but they didn't dare to stop him. What a joke, these two were peerless killing gods, and they couldn't afford to provoke them. After discussing for a while, everyone suddenly dispersed, and took advantage of this time to quickly search for the treasures in the other treasure vaults. Although the majority of the treasures had been taken by Yi Shiwen, there were still other treasures. In short, they couldn't make this trip in vain. Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing quickly arrived at the edge of the Ghost Heart Fire Array. At this time, the physical body of the Lord of Darkness, which was still in the center, was constantly emitting waves of astonishing aura, and was completely suppressed by the Ghost Heart Fire Array. However, Yi Shiwen heaved a sigh of relief. He could see that Yemo had gained the upper hand. The combination of the demonic aura and the golden light had completely suppressed the deathly aura. More than half of the physical body of the Lord of Darkness had been conquered. In this case, it was only a matter of time before Yemo completely conquered the physical body of the Lord of Darkness. Yi Shiwen, you're back? You've actually become a little stronger? Yemo's voice came out. At this time, he had already firmly gained the upper hand, so he still had spare energy to pay attention to Yi Shiwen's matters. However, when he looked at Yi Shiwen, he was immediately surprised. How long had it been? Compared to just now, Yi Shiwen's strength had actually increased by a lot. It was obvious that he had comprehended something. Even though he had been accustomed to Yi Shiwen's valiant cultivation speed, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. But then, something even more surprising happened. He saw Princess Tianqing standing next to Yi Shiwen. The machi on her body traversed the vast sky. She looked like a group of devil shadows from afar, and was very conspicuous. How did this little girl do it? Is she crazy? How can she casually accept such an inheritance? Yemo said in surprise. He was an old monster who had cultivated for many years, and his vision was very sharp. He could almost see through Princess Tianqing's cultivation at a glance. Although Yi Shiwen had already guessed it, this was the first time he had confirmed it. This was a tacit understanding between him and Princess Tianqing. If he didn't ask, Princess Tianqing wouldn't say. Everyone had their own secret. He didn't have to know, and he also didn't have to ask. Senior, you really have good eyesight. Princess Tianqing's delicate face revealed a somewhat painful expression. Forcibly accepting the inheritance like this had made her cultivation soar, but at the same time she had to bear a very big risk. If she couldn't digest this power in time, then this power would become a time bomb that could explode in her body at any time. However, she had no other choice. She had no other choice. Yi Shiwen immediately told Yemo about his encounter with Jun Dingtian. Yemo went silent for a moment and then he said, "I didn't want to interfere in the affairs of others. But since you've saved this kid once, then I'll lend you a hand. I have a technique here that can allow you to swiftly digest this energy. But it's also slightly risky, so it's up to you to make your choice." Chapter 1876. Yemo's tone was relaxed, but there was also a bit of indifference in it. Yes, for him, apart from the matters related to Yi Shiwen, there was no relationship between him and Yi Shiwen. In fact, it wasn't even qualified to attract his attention. Princess Tianqing's face revealed a pained expression. The terrifying demonic aura was churning in her muscles, tearing them apart. It seemed as if her body was in danger of collapsing at any moment. She had no other choice. Choosing to accept this inheritance at this time was already a risky move. She wouldn't have taken such a risk if she hadn't been ambitious. She bit her lower lip. Not everyone was born extraordinary, as there would always be people in the world who were more monstrous than you. Not everyone was as lucky as Yi Shiwen. Even if Yi Shiwen had obtained the mysterious space, it was hard to tell how many times he had struggled to get to where he was today. How could he have reached his current status without a bit of ruthlessness? Moreover, Princess Tianqing was a very ambitious person. She was willing to risk it all. She had already done it once, so why not do it again? "Please enlighten me, Senior." Princess Tianqing cupped her hands and said. She could tell from Yi Shiwen's attitude that this unknown spirit body wasn't an ordinary person either. She knew very well what kind of person Yi Shiwen was. On the surface, he seemed gentle and amiable, but in reality, he was a lawless person. Didn't he see how the people of the Divine Union killed without batting an eyelid? The people of the Divine Union had become more and more arrogant in recent years. Even the other great sects wouldn't dare provoke them if it wasn't necessary. It wasn't that they couldn't afford to provoke them, but it wasn't worth it. Other people simply wouldn't dare provoke the people of the Divine Union. Even with her hidden power, she wouldn't dare provoke the people of the Divine Union. However, Yi Shiwen was unscrupulous. Was it because he was ignorant? No, in her opinion, it wasn't because he was ignorant, but because he was fearless. A man should overcome all obstacles. There was a fundamental difference between this and being reckless and ignorant. Being reckless and ignorant was due to ignorance, while being courageous was due to having a big heart. It was conceivable that the spiritual body was no ordinary being. She had no other choice since she had come this far. The battle with Jun Dingtian had worsened her injuries and put her in a precarious situation. Just as she finished her sentence, a martial arts current flew out of the physical body of the Lord of Darkness and entered his body. Although this secret technique is a little dangerous, it is still a supreme secret technique. If you don't die today, you will be able to achieve great things with this technique. Yemo said coldly. "Thank you, Senior." Princess Tianqing hurriedly expressed her gratitude and went to the side to carefully comprehend it. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and told Yemo about the martial arts incarnation that he had comprehended during the fight with Jun Dingtian. Yemo was silent for a moment and then he said, "This is also my fault. But I didn't want to tell you so early, because although this secret technique isn't complicated, not everyone can cultivate it successfully. It belongs to the divine martial path, and once it's cultivated successfully, it's a matter of course that your strength will increase greatly. I didn't expect Jun Dingtian's origin to be the reincarnation of a deity. No wonder he knows this secret technique." Yemo said, I originally wanted to wait until you cultivated to the peak of the profound death realm and was about to prove your Tao. With the strength of the martial arts incarnation, it would be more convenient for you to prove your Tao. Before that, I didn't want you to create doppelgangers because of this matter, because condensing the martial arts incarnation would greatly slow down your progress. In particular, the more powerful the magical secret technique, the more time it takes to cultivate it. I originally wanted you to cultivate bravely and diligently without being disturbed by external things. Now it seems that I took it for granted. If you don't know the martial arts incarnation, you will inevitably be at a disadvantage when you meet such an opponent in the future. Although martial arts incarnation is still rare, once it appears, you will suffer a great loss just like this time. If it wasn't for this girl, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to escape from this calamity. Now, I'll teach you a martial arts incarnation cultivation method called myriad embodiment. It's not a cultivation method of the demon race, nor was it created by the Demon King. However, it came from an extremely powerful expert who was later defeated by the Demon King. In the end, this martial arts incarnation fell into the hands of the Demon King. However, when one's cultivation reached the level of the Demon King, his body was like a heaven and earth. He could already transform his body into a world and could contain endless skills. For him, this method was no longer useful. Therefore, this method was buried in the end. Myriad embodiment. Yi Shiwen read out these 4 names. There's also a reason for this. The so-called martial arts incarnation is to entrust one's own skills to the martial arts, and then separate them to form a new martial arts incarnation. It's a bit similar to the practice of external incarnation, but it's different from external incarnation. The martial arts incarnation is entrusted to one's own martial arts, and can completely integrate with one's own martial arts at a critical time. Then, one can erupt with very tyrannical strength. Yemo continued, after one's cultivation reaches a high level, one must practice this method because many people can't advance by leaps and bounds like they did in the early stages of cultivation. It's very likely that they won't make any progress for tens of thousands of years. In this case, the only thing they can do is to constantly purify their skills, and deepen them day by day. However, they won't be able to produce any essential changes. And the martial arts incarnation method is to a large extent the research of those who couldn't make a breakthrough. Generally speaking, the martial arts incarnation can store completely different skills, ranging from 1 to 9 times. The more the martial arts incarnation, the rarer it is. Even many deities who practice martial arts incarnation can only increase their strength by 5 or 6 times. It's very rare to see martial arts incarnation more than 7 times. But the martial arts incarnation I'm going to teach you can accumulate 9 times the strength of martial arts incarnation. It can be said to be a top-notch martial arts incarnation method. Yemo said, if this method were to be spread, even deities would try to snatch it. Because the martial arts incarnation method itself is created for deities. The martial arts incarnation method you mentioned before doesn't exist for deities. Deities can shake the world with just a raise of their hands or feet. This kind of consumption can be completely recovered in a few breaths. Not to mention, they can condense a divine kingdom in their body, forming a world of their own. So, they can replenish a huge amount of power at any time. This weakness is meaningless for such immortal powerhouses. So, do you understand? Yuemo said. Yi Shiwen nodded. Even with all these flaws, the martial arts incarnation method was still an earth-shattering creation. With his current strength, it could be said to be invincible at the peak of the profound life realm. If it wasn't for Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles, he was absolutely confident that he could fight with Jun Dingtian. He couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be if his strength skyrocketed by 9 times in an instant. This was definitely an earth-shattering method. But you also have to know that it's very difficult to condense martial arts incarnation. You should be very clear about how you got your strength. It can be said that you've gone through a lot of hardships, but even so, you still need to condense a martial arts incarnation that is similar to your strength. You can imagine how difficult it is. Moreover, it's even more difficult to condense it to 9 times. I originally didn't want you to learn this martial arts incarnation so early. This will only slow down your progress. Yemo sighed and said. There were many things that he had calculated clearly, but as the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. Many things couldn't be accomplished just by sitting at home and making plans. Yi Shiwen knew that Yemo had said that it would be difficult, but in fact, he had already cultivated to this level. So, the difficulty of retraining his martial power was naturally much lower than before. Although it wasn't as difficult as eating and drinking, but it was still a lot easier. Although this body incarnation is good, it can't be used for a while. Moreover, I'm about to set off to the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits, and it's very likely that I'll have to face Jun Dingtian. Yi Shiwen frowned. This made him quite fearful. Moreover, there was still the female opponent that even Jun Dingtian was extremely fearful of. Even he wasn't very sure how strong she was. This is a very big problem. Although I've suppressed the spiritual wisdom, I'm still trapped here, and I can't leave in a short period of time. This is the most troublesome thing. Yemo was also quite vexed. Since you want to achieve the effect of rapid growth in a short period of time, the only way is to take a risk. Although the great art of disintegration that I imparted to the girl just now is a bit dangerous, it's also a way to go. You can kill more powerful beasts and refine them. Even if only a small part of their martial arts is refined by you, there's still a way to condense a martial arts incarnation in a short period of time, if you can make it in time. That's the only way. Yi Shiwen nodded. Even Princess Tianqing had such ambition and boldness. Why couldn't he take a little risk? The inheritance of the Lord of Dead Spirits was related to his future fight against the Abyss Devil Lord. He absolutely couldn't afford to make any mistake. Thinking of this, there was nothing for him to hesitate about. All right, I'll impart this great art of disintegration to you, Yemo said immediately. Then, a martial arts torrent flew out and directly instilled into Yi Shiwen's body. In this martial arts torrent there were 2 peerless techniques. One was the technique of the body incarnation, and the other was the great art of disintegration. Yi Shiwen quickly looked at it. Chapter 1877. Yi Shiwen finally understood what Yemo had meant when he saw the mnemonic chant and the various information contained in the Hua Gong Great Law. Yemo had said that there was a bit of danger in this technique. He immediately had the urge to curse out loud. Is this a little dangerous? Yi Shiwen could see through the essence of many power techniques with just a glance at his current martial arts realm. It was simply impossible to hide from him. He immediately understood the various tricks of this Hua Gong Great Technique with just a glance. This kind of Hua Gong Great Technique absorbed the martial power of others, and then transformed it into one's own martial power. Then, it would be transformed into one's own martial power. However, the most evil aspect of this technique was that the absorption effect would be quite limited if the opponent's martial power was far inferior to one's own. In fact, the absorption effect would be quite limited if the opponent's martial power was comparable to one's own. Moreover, the success rate was very high. Even someone as bold as Yi Shiwen couldn't help but suck in a mouthful of cold air when he saw the Hua Gong Great Technique. Practicing this technique was like gambling with one's life. He looked at the myriad incarnations technique again. This technique was very complete. The essence of each technique was very precise. He had learned it almost at a glance. He didn't need the mysterious spaces guidance at all. He used to rely on the mysterious spaces guidance. In fact, it could even be said that he was dependent on it. Yi Shiwen was like a primary school student at that time. But he had to solve middle school and high school students' questions. He hadn't learned the knowledge of middle school and high school students. So, he could only use the mysterious space to find the correct answer. He didn't know the principle behind it. However, he could use it freely. But now, hundreds of years had passed in the blink of an eye. He was no longer the same as he had been when he had just stepped into the martial arts world. His martial arts knowledge and realm couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. These methods were exceptionally exquisite. In fact, many of them made Yi Shiwen feel like slapping the table and exclaiming in admiration. However, he didn't need the mysterious space since he had such a detailed cultivation process. This was completely different from when he was trying to figure out the Sky Emperor Divine Fist, which he had no information about at all. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this technique of myriad body transfiguration was very brilliant. However, it was different from a doppelganger or a second primordial spirit because it didn't have a physical body to rely on. Therefore, it couldn't be like Yi Shiwen's previous Star Beast avatar that could cultivate on its own and entrust its primordial spirit to it. However, a martial arts incarnation also had something that a clone or a second primordial spirit couldn't compare with. It was because it was entrusted to the martial arts. Therefore, it could be completely accommodated into one's body at a critical moment, and its power would skyrocket all of a sudden. If his cultivation were to double, then the increase in his combat strength would not be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was very likely that his combat strength would increase by 4 or 5 times. This was the reason why Jun Dingtian's martial power had only increased by a few times, but his combat power was still terrifying to Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen had to cultivate on his own in order to condense the martial arts. It would take a long time to accumulate, unless he could prove his Tao one day. Otherwise, this martial arts incarnation could only be used as a secret technique and couldn't be used frequently. Every time a martial arts incarnation was condensed, it would double the martial arts. Although it was much easier to condense again after exhausting it, it still took a lot of time. Otherwise, Jun Dingtian wouldn't have let Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing go so easily. Moreover, to condense a martial arts incarnation, one would need to separate one's own martial art. The more powerful the martial arts, the more powerful the martial arts incarnation that could be entrusted. To say that it was double or triple was actually an ideal state. Many people who cultivated martial arts incarnation couldn't achieve such an ideal state at all. In fact, it was already very difficult for an ordinary person to cultivate a martial arts incarnation that could double the martial arts incarnation's power by 50%. This had something to do with the martial arts one had chosen to entrust. Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles were so tyrannical mainly because they were very powerful. It was naturally extraordinary to be entrusted with all of one's martial arts. These were all things that needed to be thought about in detail. In short, it was originally something that needed to be carefully crafted and planned slowly. Now, it was naturally not that easy to achieve in a short time. Using the great art of dispelling to speed things up was a risky move in itself. At this time, Yi Shiwen turned his head to look at Princess Tianqing, who was sitting cross-legged and using the great art of dispelling to refine the soaring demon energy on her body. He saw that the muscles on her body had ruptured in an instant and blood was spurting out. It looked extremely hideous. However, she was digesting the martial arts bit by bit. Soon, he realized that something was wrong. Princess Tianqing's martial arts were almost no weaker than his. Although it was because of the unknown inheritance, in fact, this was almost the limit. Even Yi Shiwen didn't have any hope of advancing further in the profound life realm, let alone her. Then how was she going to absorb all this martial arts? And at this moment, he saw a faint demonic aura emitting from Princess Tianqing's body, condensing into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation. Boundless fist intent spread out, and endless power surged towards the wheel of the 6 paths of reincarnation. This girl is actually also condensing martial arts incarnation. From the looks of it, her technique is quite brilliant. This is the technique of the Azura clan. If that's the case, then it's not surprising. The Azura clan also had a demon king in the past, and could be said to be glorious for a time. It's not surprising that the clan has such a technique. Yemo said. Yi Shiwen, although this martial arts incarnation is not a technique that everyone can learn, there are too many clans, families, and sects in this world that are glorious now or in the past. They have passed down many earth-shattering techniques. If you underestimate the people of this world because of this, then you're not far from disaster. Although this technique is a top-notch technique for condensing martial arts incarnation, in reality, unless you can condense 9 incarnations, it's not much of an advantage compared to other techniques. Moreover, as your cultivation increases, the martial arts of your martial arts incarnation will also need to be condensed again. It can be said to be very complicated. I understand. Yi Shiwen understood what Yi Mo meant. The 9-fold martial arts incarnation might seem powerful, but the premise was that he had to condense 9 incarnations. Moreover, every time his cultivation increased, he would need to condense the martial arts incarnation again. This required a huge amount of spiritual energy and martial arts. It was really not something that a poor person could afford. It was completely a technique that belonged to the tall, rich, and handsome. As for the demon summoning banner that you brought back, I just used my divine thoughts to probe it. Leave it for me. With the demon summoning banner, when I refine the demon summoning banner, I won't be considered an outsider compared to this spiritual intelligence. On the contrary, I can use the demon summoning banner to forcefully devour this spiritual intelligence. When that happens, I can quickly come out to help you. Just with this physical body, I can defeat countless experts. Yi Mo continued. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and directly handed the demon summoning banner to Yi Mo. The demon summoning banner was useless in his hands for the time being. Moreover, it was obvious that the demon summoning banner itself was the natal celestial device of the Lord of Darkness. If Yi Mo took over the physical body of the Lord of Darkness, the demon summoning banner would be able to exert its greatest power in his hands. Moreover, there was no distinction between him and Yi Mo. There were no taboos between them. Alright, I won't say much. Hurry up and go to the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits to search for the inheritance of the Lord of Dead Spirit. That is our main objective this time. We must not let anyone get there before us. As for me, you can rest assured. With the Ghost Heart Flame formation, even a profound Death Realm expert would not be able to do anything to me, said Yi Mo. Right now, Yi Shiwen was most worried about Yi Mo. Since Yi Mo was fine, he did not have to worry anymore. Yi Shiwen got up and glanced at Princess Tianqing, who was still in seclusion. Her body was constantly being torn apart and recovering. After a period of time, he would also be in the same situation. There were no surprises. His figure flashed, and he was already out of the Ghost Heart fire array. At this time, the entire hall was already empty. Who would dare to stay in this hall with the existence of such a big evil star like Yi Shiwen? Wouldn't that be courting death? The wealth in the other halls had also been plundered clean by those people. Yi Shiwen hadn't gotten a single thing. However, he didn't care about it. After all, he had made a huge harvest this time. So, these worldly possessions were nothing compared to his harvest. With another sway of his mind, he had already exited the treasury of the Lord of Darkness and returned to the abyss of dead spirits. The situation was different from the treasury of the Lord of Darkness, where the dark aura was denser. Outside, there was more deathly aura and the power of death mixed together, eroding everyone's spirit. Yi Shiwen released the aura from his body. A golden airwave swept out. The deathly aura and the power of death's laws could not get close to him at all. They were all blocked. At the same time, his entire body was like a bright lamp in the darkness. Immediately, he attracted the attention of many tyrannical and ferocious beings' divine senses. All of them swept towards Yi Shiwen's body. He immediately sensed them the moment they swept towards him. A sneer involuntarily flashed across the corner of his mouth. It just so happened that he was in need of an endless amount of cultivation power. In the eyes of others, those undying ferocious creatures were terrifying monsters, but in his eyes, it was just the cultivation power that he needed to condense a martial arts incarnation, a cultivation power that could run and jump. However, he still had to be careful not to attract the attention of the profound death realm's undying monsters. Otherwise, he could only flee. Boom! Suddenly, the void within a radius of hundreds of miles suddenly collapsed on the spot. A huge demonic claw directly reached out. Chapter 1878. This was a skinny death claw. It did not have much flesh and blood, only some flesh and densely packed nerves were attached to the eerie white bones. It looked ferocious and frightening. The power of death immediately spread out the moment it attacked. It was like a claw that could destroy the heavens. It directly smashed downwards. This attack could be said to be earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Yi Shiwen could immediately tell that this was a dead creature at the peak of the profound life realm. In order to attract these ferocious dead creatures, he deliberately suppressed his own strength when he released his aura. This made him look no different from an ordinary martial artist at the peak of the profound life realm. As expected, he immediately attracted a ferocious creature at the peak of the profound life realm. However, even so, the density of the tyrannical ferocious dead creatures in the undead abyss still made his hair stand on end, and he trembled with fear. He had just revealed his aura, and he had already been targeted. Moreover, this was at its weakest. When the ferocious dead creatures in the undead abyss returned, how grand would the situation be? From this, it could be deduced how frightening the undead lord was at his peak. With such an army, it was enough to sweep through a world and dominate the world. If he could obtain the inheritance of the undead lord, he would have the confidence to face the abyss demon lord. Yi Shiwen immediately raised his hand and blocked. Clang! There was a loud bang, and the sound of gold and iron colliding was heard. Sparks flew in all directions. At this time, Yi Shiwen's counterattack arrived in the blink of an eye. Along the claw, he directly grabbed a golden long sword. The tip of the sword suddenly pointed towards the void, and suddenly picked out a huge crack, picked out a subspace passage, and at the end of the passage, an incomparably huge skeleton appeared in front of him. This was actually a bone demon. Moreover, it was a terrifying bone demon at the peak of the profound life realm. Human die. This bone demon had already developed spiritual wisdom. At this time, its hiding place was directly exposed by Yi Shiwen's sword, so it was somewhat ashamed and annoyed. In its hollow eyes, there was a gloomy ghostly fire burning unceasingly, incomparably greedy. It had an incomparable desire for Yi Shiwen's body. For it, the only way to prove its Tao was to continuously devour a large amount of flesh and blood, and then regenerate flesh and blood on the surface of its body. When the flesh and blood completely regenerated on the surface of its body, it would naturally prove its Tao. At that time, it would be another bone demon god, and it would be even more powerful than other gods. It had already gradually regrown some flesh, and its cultivation was also approaching the peak of the profound life realm. It could feel the vigorous vitality in Yi Shiwen's body. If it could devour, then it would definitely be able to grow a large chunk of flesh, and its cultivation would improve even more. If it devoured, it could even break through the peak of the profound life realm. A giant of the profound death stage. Even in a place like the Dead Spirit Abyss where ferocious creatures roamed the streets, a giant of the profound death stage would still be a giant. Their status was incomparable to that of the profound life stage. You're courting death. Greed has blinded your eyes. Time to die. Yi Shiwen shouted. His movements were extremely fast. His physical body had long been tyrannical to the point that ordinary people could not understand. On the spot, he directly took a step forward. The long sword in his hand directly emitted a shocking sword radiance. It directly pierced towards the bone demon in the depths of the void, at the end of the subspace passageway. However, the bone demon directly formed a claw in the void. It became bigger and bigger, and then formed a white bone cage, grabbing towards Yi Shiwen. Clang! There was a loud roar. Without any suspense, the white bone cage was completely cut apart by Yi Shiwen. The seemingly indestructible bones could not even withstand a single blow from Yi Shiwen's sword radiance. It was directly cut apart on the spot and forcibly dispersed. Roar! The bone demon screamed in pain and continuously retreated. In its hollow eyes, there was a dark, ghostly fire constantly flickering, representing its intelligence. At this moment, it seemed that it had somewhat discovered that the person in front of it was not to be trifled with. He was like an iron plate, and it seemed to have kicked an iron plate. Thinking of leaving now, isn't it too late? Yi Shiwen sneered. His figure directly disappeared in the void, and then only a sharp whistling sound could be heard. Immediately after, his figure reappeared, and was already above the bone demon. The sword radiance flickered again, and the clanging sound continued. However, at this moment, the bone demon could only see that at this moment there was a special substance condensing in the entire heaven and earth. In an instant, all the bones condensed, and then instantly formed a long forest of bones. Then, it crazily grew and pierced towards Yi Shiwen. Although they were only bones, but they were able to instantly pierce through the sky like a hornet's nest, and even the space was pierced. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Yi Shiwen's entire body constantly shuttled through the forest of bones. Under his body there were constantly new forests of bones, and they constantly pierced towards Yi Shiwen, trying to stop Yi Shiwen's sneak attack. If one looked from afar, they would only be able to see a dazzling golden light tearing through the sky, and behind this golden light, countless forests of bones directly grew, and instantly covered the entire heaven and earth. However, each time there was no way to pierce through the golden light, and each time it was only a little bit, but it was like a natural moat. Yi Shiwen's speed was extremely fast, and in just a moment, he had already killed his way to the front of the bone demon. It's over. Yi Shiwen's face was expressionless, and he coldly said. Although this bone demon was already very powerful, and was not considered weak among the peak profound life realm experts, it could only be said that it was unlucky to encounter Yi Shiwen. Boom! The sword light in the sky grew bigger and bigger, and very soon, it directly formed a torrent of energy, and fiercely bombarded the body of the bone demon. On the spot, the bone demon's body, which was comparable to metal and stone, was completely smashed into pieces in an instant. After that, Yi Shiwen spread out his big hand, and an incomparably huge whirlpool appeared on his palm. Endless death energy and the power of death, as well as the martial power emitted by the bone demon, were completely absorbed by him in one breath. Although this bone demon was far inferior to Yi Shiwen, it was after all a terrifying existence at the peak of profound life realm, and its martial power could also be said to be terrifying. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that an incomparably powerful force had poured into his body in a split second, and his meridians had almost burst open. If it was not for the fact that his tyrant body had already been cultivated to the step of strengthening the meridians, just this martial power alone would have completely burst him. From the outside, in an instant, his entire body looked red, and countless capillaries were forcefully burst by this martial power. He looked like a person of blood, and his expression was incomparably ferocious. He continuously operated the great art of transformation and unceasingly condensed his martial power. The martial power absorbed from the bone demon was slowly transformed into the purest martial power, which was approximately equivalent to about 1/20th of his own martial power. In other words, he still had to kill 19 bone demons, which were at the peak of profound life realm, to be able to condense the first martial arts incarnation. One could imagine how difficult it was to cultivate this martial arts incarnation. Because this was the first time he condensed, the degree of difficulty was also the highest. In the future, it would be much easier to condense the same martial arts incarnation. If he did not condense the martial arts incarnation, then his martial power would eventually disappear in his body bit by bit, because his body would not be able to store it. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally began to operate the martial arts of the body into myriad transformations, and a martial art was gradually separated from his body. Behind him, endless starlight was incomparably brilliant and instantly spread out, forming a vast universe. It looked incomparably vast, and Yi Shiwen was this universe, the only true God, and the only ruler of this universe. This process was incomparably painful, as if a person's arm was being chopped off. This was forcibly tearing out a part of his martial arts, and then condensing it again. This was his martial arts, and his cultivation in the martial arts could also be said to be a generation's grandmaster. Although it was not comparable to Jun Dingtian's cultivation in the sword arts, it was much more powerful than many of his peers who specialized in the martial arts for their entire lives. This was the shattered star fist of his martial arts. The shattered star fist was constantly improved in his hands, becoming more and more powerful. Even now, it was still a very powerful martial arts in his hands, becoming more and more powerful. Compared to the original, it was already beyond recognition, as if it had been reborn. Even if the creator of the shattered star fist were to see it, he would have to concede defeat. After all, the realm was already completely different. He wanted to entrust his first martial arts incarnation to the shattered star fist, and in the future, he would also condense other martial arts. He was different from Jun Dingtian. Jun Dingtian had refined 3,000 sword principles, which seemed very powerful, and even had broad prospects for the future. If each of the 3,000 sword principles could be cultivated to the extreme, perhaps there would be a day when one could prove one's way with strength. However, that was too far away and too scattered. Even if he condensed 3,000 sword principles, it would only increase his combat power by a few times. For Yi Shiwen, who was eager to condense the first martial arts incarnation and increase his combat power, this was not desirable. Moreover, everyone had their own path, and they were all different. After a long time, a figure with the sky full of starlight slowly condensed behind him. Although it was only in embryonic form, it carried unparalleled power. Yi Shiwen knew that his first martial arts incarnation was preliminarily formed, and the next step was to continuously refine it. With the formation of this martial arts incarnation, he did not stop, and directly flew in the direction of the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits, which he knew. Chapter 1879. Yi Shiwen headed towards the tomb of the undead spirit lord at an extremely fast speed. He had basically appeared thousands of miles away in a flash. Although he didn't choose to look for the tomb of the undead spirit lord immediately, it didn't mean that he didn't care about it. In fact, he had thought about it clearly before he made his choice. The tomb of the undead spirit lord was the main purpose of the major forces. Everything would be worth it if they could obtain the inheritance of the undead spirit lord. If he obtained the inheritance of the undead spirit lord, the entire undead abyss would be in his hands. What kind of fortuitous encounter or treasure could be compared to this? However, after thinking about it, he decided to seize the demon summoning flag first. The inheritance of the Lord of the Undead Spirits would definitely be the focus of countless pairs of eyes. There were many powerful experts searching for it, and there were also many powerful experts gathering there. Although Yi Shiwen was conceited, he wouldn't have an easy time if he encountered those old monsters who had cultivated for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. At most, he would only be one of those old monsters. It wouldn't be easy for him to kill his way out of the encirclement of those experts. He even thought about the consequences if he lost the inheritance of the undead spirit lord. Therefore, he decided to snatch the demon summoning flag first after thinking about it for a long time. Now that he had snatched the devil beckoning banner, his strength had greatly increased, and he was about to reach the peak. Moreover, he was about to condense his first martial arts incarnation. If he were to erupt, his battle prowess would double. At that time, his battle prowess would undergo earth-shattering changes. Yi Shiwen was confident that he could compete with those old monsters who had cultivated for many years and kill his way out of them. This was Yi Shiwen's true confidence and foundation after condensing his first martial arts incarnation. With this martial arts incarnation, Yi Shiwen could advance and retreat freely. Even if he encountered Jun Dingtian, he would dare to compete with him. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel anxious. After all, he didn't know if the inheritance of the Lord of Undead Spirits would belong to anyone. He wasn't like those major powers, who could split their forces into two groups and take them all. To him, this was the only choice he had. He could only start with the easy part. Now, he had to rush over as fast as possible. However, it seemed like the inheritance of the undead spirit lord had yet to begin. Otherwise, Chu Yun, Zhan Ming and the others wouldn't be able to compete with Yi Shiwen so easily. They were the people who had been selected by the major forces to inherit the undead spirit lord's inheritance. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could obtain the undead spirit lord's inheritance. Therefore, if he rushed over now, he should still be able to make it. But even so, he couldn't guarantee that he would miss anything, so he had to speed up. The inheritance of the Lord of the Undead was located in the deepest part of the undead abyss. In the deepest part of the abyss of the dead souls, there was an incomparably huge plain that stretched across the entire abyss of the dead souls. In fact, if the abyss of the dead souls was an incomparably huge abyss, then this plain was actually the bottom of the abyss of the dead souls, which was also the deepest part. There were many powerful ferocious beasts residing there, and there were even quite a few profound death realm ferocious beasts. These ferocious beasts usually divided up the entire plane of the abyss of the dead souls. If it wasn't for the undead tide that forced most of them out, they wouldn't even dare to approach such a dangerous place. Even so, the remaining ferocious beasts were enough to tear the invaders into pieces. It was still extremely dangerous. However, everyone had no other choice because they had no other choice. This might be their only chance of success. Apart from the profound death realm ferocious beasts, there were many heavenly beings and even profound life realm ferocious beasts living on this incomparably huge plain. They formed groups of 3 to 5 and roared. To others, this might be an extremely huge threat. However, to Yi Shiwen, it was the best opportunity. Even if there weren't any peak profound life realm ferocious beasts attacking him, the power that these ferocious beasts could convert was far inferior to that of a peak profound life realm white bone demon. However, it was still better than nothing for him. When the number of ferocious beasts accumulated to a certain extent, it would also cause a qualitative change. To Yi Shiwen, who was currently in the process of condensing his first martial arts incarnation, even the most insignificant power was absolutely not something he could let go of. Just like that, he slaughtered his way towards the abyss of the dead souls. His speed was extremely fast as he continuously shuttled back and forth. Suddenly, when he was about to reach the periphery of the plane of the dead souls, he saw endless dark clouds of death covering everything in the distance. It was as if everything in the sky and on the ground had been completely covered. Those aren't dark clouds. Yi Shiwen immediately opened his heaven's eye. Only then did he discover that those were not dark clouds of death at all. They were clearly an army of death formed by countless ferocious beasts. At this moment, these ferocious beasts had all gathered together and did not leave. It was as if they were besieging something. Yi Shiwen opened his heaven's eye and looked inside, only to see that they were besieging a group of people. Yi Shiwen took a look and saw that these ferocious beasts were besieging a person. Who else could it be other than Qin Lai? Qin Lai and the others, who had set off earlier than him, were now actually being besieged. Even though the individual strength of these countless ferocious beasts was not too high, they were still able to trap Qin Lai and the others, completely trapping them within. There was no end to them, no end to them. Furthermore, there was no lack of profound life realm experts among them. Faced with such a mixed group, even profound death realm experts would feel their hearts go numb. This was the most frightening aspect of the endless army of the dead. There was simply no end to them. Even with Qin Lai's cultivation, he was still trapped within. Furthermore, Qin Lai seemed to have gained a lot from the battle with Jun Dingtian. He had actually directly stepped into the peak of the profound life realm in one go. Furthermore, his cultivation was extremely stable. It did not seem like he had just stepped into the peak of the profound life realm. This made Yi Shiwen somewhat sigh with emotion. These geniuses were indeed extraordinary characters. No wonder Princess Tianqing had said that these geniuses couldn't be calculated with common sense. Perhaps they would suddenly have an inspiration and soar to the top in one go. Yi Shiwen, with their talent and the endless wealth of their sex, the speed at which they rose was naturally incomparably fast. Furthermore, the martial sect had an immortal inheritance of a sovereign realm expert. What kind of person was a sovereign realm expert? Just the inheritance that Yi Shiwen had obtained from Yi Mo had allowed him to walk all the way to where he was today. Furthermore, this sovereign realm expert had left behind a complete inheritance. Naturally, he could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had also heard many rumors about the martial sect during this period of time. It was different from the other emperors who were confirmed to have fallen or passed away in meditation. It was said that the founder of the martial sect had gone to a distant spacetime. There hadn't been any news of him for many years. However, he still had a formidable deterrent force until he received the definite news of his death. Furthermore, in the eyes of many, Emperor Qin was the most outstanding person in the modern era. He was also the only great existence who had proven his Tao and become an emperor in the modern era. How could such a person die so easily? Therefore, the martial sect was still the most fearsome immortal inheritance. In the Xian world, they had yet to spread their tentacles. However, the martial sect was still very famous in the myriad heavens. Yi Shiwen's gaze swept over. These dead spirits could be said to have advanced and retreated in a well-controlled manner. It was as if they were marching in a formation. Although these dead spirits were not weak, most of them did not have any spiritual wisdom. It was impossible for them to be so well organized. It was very obvious that there was a powerful existence commanding them from behind. His gaze swept across the area. Indeed, it was as he had expected. In the depths of these dead spirits and ferocious creatures, there were a few dead spirits at the peak of the profound life stage high up in the air. They were commanding these dead spirits and ferocious creatures to launch wave after wave of attacks towards the martial organization's group. These dead spirits at the peak of the profound life realm firmly occupied positions in all four directions. They were commanding them calmly. They were like great generals among the humans. Their cultivation was tyrannical, and they knew how to use troop. Every time the martial sex group wanted to rush out, they would be blocked by these dead spirits. Even if Qin Lai personally organized a surprise attack, he would still be beaten back by these dead spirits. Yi Shiwen immediately understood why Qin Lai was actually not a match for them despite his cultivation. These dead spirits at the peak of the profound life realm were not inferior to Qin Lai. If he wanted to break out of the encirclement alone, he could. However, the martial sex people behind him would definitely be annihilated here. Young master, you can break out by yourself. Don't worry about us. Seeing that the encirclement was getting smaller and smaller, they were also getting closer and closer. They were about to be completely annihilated. These people had no choice but to grit their teeth and be ruthless. This time, those who had followed Qin Lai were the experts of their faction in the martial sect. There were also some outer sect elders who had pledged their allegiance to Qin Lai in advance. It could be said that they were the backbone of Qin Lai's faction. If they were completely annihilated here, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the faction that supported Qin Lai. That's absolutely impossible. Our Qin clan has never abandoned our companions and fled first. You definitely can't start with me. Qin Lai roared and gritted his teeth. At most, I will use it. I will definitely bring all of you out of here. He had already used all his strength. He continuously blasted out fist shadows that filled the sky, drawing out an ancient world that ate raw meat and drank blood. He crushed the dead spirits that were pouncing towards him. However, there were too many of these dead spirits. They were simply endless. Even with his cultivation, he felt powerless. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.